I still remember that night like it never really ended. The kind of night that seeps into your bones and stays there. No matter how many years go by, the rain had been falling since evening. A steady curtain of water that blurred everything. The trees, the hills, even the road lines on Highway 37. The wipers on my cruiser squeaked back and forth, tired like me. It was almost 1 in the morning. The kind of quiet shift where you almost start to believe nothing bad ever happens out here. Then the radio cracked. Unit 12, we've got a report of a trespasser at Ridgefield Cemetery. Caller says they saw a man wandering near the Old West Gate. No vehicle nearby. You're the closest unit. I remember sighing. Ridgefield again. That place always had some story floating around. Kids sneaking in or people saying they saw lights between the stones. Nothing ever came of it. Still, I answered, copy that. On my way. I turned onto the dirt road that wound up the hill. The headlights caught the rain in long white streaks. The road was slick, the mud pulling at my tires. On either side, the trees leaned close, their branches scraping against the roof as I passed. The cemetery sat on top of Ridgefield Hill, a quiet old patch of ground that had been there since the 1800s. Most people avoided it, even in the daytime. As I drove, the rain thickened. My headlights picked up fog rolling across the road, slow and heavy. I remember thinking it looked like breath. The gate came into view, a rusted arch with the name Ridgefield half missing, the F bent like it was trying to fall off. I parked by the fence and left the engine running. The red and blue lights reflected off the wet stones, making everything look like it was bleeding color. I stepped out, pulling my jacket tight. The rain was colder up there. The sound of it hitting the leaves was louder than it should have been, like the hill was hollow. My flashlight beam wavered through the mist, cutting across rows of crooked headstones. I called out, "Sheriff's Department, if anyone's out here, you need to come out." Nothing. Just the rain tapping on metal and stone. I started down the main path. The mud sucked at my boots, each step leaving a deep print. The beam of my flashlight caught names, dates, angels missing their faces. Some of the graves had sunk in over time, forming dark puddles where the rain gathered. The wind picked up and moved through the trees in slow waves. For a moment, I thought I heard something else under it, a kind of whisper, soft and close. But when I turned, there was no one. I told myself it was just the wind. That's what we all do, right? Pretend the strange things have easy answers. Halfway up the path, I found footprints, bare ones. They were pressed deep into the mud. The toes pointed toward the far side of the cemetery. Whoever made them had been walking slowly, almost dragging their feet. The prints looked fresh. I shined my light over them, trying to figure out where they led. They stopped near an old oak tree, the biggest one on the hill. The bark was black with rain, and the roots broke through the ground like bones. I walked around it, scanning the ground. That's when I saw the shape near the fence. At first, I thought it was a shadow. Then my light caught the outline of a man standing perfectly still by the gate. He was facing the woods, not me. His clothes looked soaked through, dark and heavy. I couldn't see his face under the brim of what looked like a hat. "Sir!" I called out, keeping my voice steady. "You're trespassing on private property. I need you to turn around. No movement. Sir." The rain got louder somehow, hammering against the fence, the stones, my jacket. My heart was beating faster now. I took a few steps closer, my boots sliding in the mud. "Turn around!" He didn't move. Didn't even twitch. I was maybe 10 feet away when I realized something was wrong. The rain wasn't hitting him. It was hitting the ground all around him, but his clothes stayed dry. I blinked hard, thinking it was just the light playing tricks. I called out again, quieter this time. "Hey, you okay?" That's when he turned his head. Just a little, enough for me to see the side of his face. Pale skin. Hollow cheek, no eyes. Just dark, empty sockets staring into the mist. I froze. Couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Then, in the space of a blink, he was gone. The fence was empty. The rain fell through where he had been standing. I don't remember how long I stayed there, just staring at that spot. My flashlight shook in my hand. I wanted to call dispatch, tell them I'd seen someone, but the words didn't come. Who would believe that? Finally, I forced myself to move. I checked the fence line, mud, puddles, and nothing else. No footprints leading away. The ground where he'd been standing was completely dry. When I turned back toward my cruiser, the hill looked different. The fog had thickened, swallowing half the cemetery. I couldn't even see the gate anymore. I started walking faster, then running. The path felt longer going back. My radio crackled in my jacket pocket, and I nearly jumped. Unit 12, status check. You still on scene? I fumbled for the mic. Yeah, still on scene. Haven't found anyone. My voice didn't sound like mine. You want backup? I hesitated. My instinct said yes, but something else, something I can't explain, told me no. Like if anyone else came up that hill, something worse would happen. Negative, I said finally. I'll clear the area and head back. The drive down was quiet, except for the rain hitting the windshield. But even that started to sound strange. It wasn't a steady rhythm anymore. It came in uneven bursts, like footsteps on the roof. I remember looking in the rearview mirror as I turned onto Highway 37. The cemetery gate was gone behind the fog. But I swear I saw someone standing on the hill, just a dark figure watching the taillights fade. When I got back to the station, I tried to write the report. I kept it simple. Responded to trespassing call. No suspect found. But my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Every time I blinked, I saw that face again. The hollow eyes. The way the rain slid right through him. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. Around 3 a.m., I drove back out there. Don't ask me why, I just needed to be sure. The rain had stopped by then. The moon was out, silver and sharp. The cemetery looked peaceful, like nothing had ever happened. But when I walked up to that oak tree again, I saw something glinting in the mud. A badge. Rusted, bent in half. My own number on it, I didn't drop it there. I know I didn't. And yet, when I picked it up, it was warm. Like it had just come out of someone's hand. I don't tell this story much anymore. People around here still talk about Ridgefield, about strange lights, and a man walking the fence line. They say he only appears when it rains. Sometimes, late at night, I drive that stretch of Highway 37 again. I tell myself it's just habit, that I'm not really looking for anything. But when the rain starts and the wipers squeak, I find myself glancing at the rearview mirror just to make sure the back seat's empty. Because ever since that night on the hill, the rain never sounds like rain anymore. It sounds like someone walking just behind me. I went back to Ridgefield 3 nights later. Not because I wanted to, because I couldn't stop thinking about it every time. I closed my eyes. I saw that figure again, the man standing in the rain, the hollow eyes, the way the water never touched him. I tried to convince myself it was a trick of the light, maybe exhaustion, maybe my mind playing games after too many long shifts. But deep down, I knew better. You can't unsee something like that. That night, the dispatch came through again. Different voice this time. A man who sounded nervous. Said he'd been driving down Highway 37 around midnight when he saw someone walking by the cemetery fence. Said the man was barefoot. Said he didn't look right. The line had gone quiet after that. Then just static. They sent me again. I told myself it was just a coincidence. Same hill, same rain, same kind of call. But when I got closer, that uneasy feeling started building again, like I was driving toward something I'd already met once before. The rain came back just as I turned off the main road. Not heavy this time, just thin, steady drops tapping against the windshield. The world looked colorless in my headlights. Gray trees, gray mud, gray sky. I pulled up to the same gate, parked the cruiser, and killed the lights. Everything felt wrong in the same quiet way it had before. The air smelled like wet leaves and iron. When I stepped out, the rain was colder. Too cold for early fall. I started walking up the path. The beam of my flashlight slid over the same crooked stones, the same bent angels, the same deep puddles that looked like open graves. Every sound, the rain, the creak of the trees, my own breathing echoed louder than it should have. Halfway up, I saw them again. Footprints, but not the same as last time. These weren't bare feet. These looked wrong. They were too long, too narrow. The toes were pointed, not rounded, almost like claws dragging through the mud. I crouched down and touched one. The ground was soft, still warm. Whatever made those tracks had passed through only minutes before I got there. I followed them, sweeping my light across the ground. They led me past the oak tree, past the newer graves, up toward the old part of the cemetery, the section no one visited anymore. The headstones there leaned so far you could barely read the names. Some were just blank slabs now. The smell hit me before I saw it. Iron and rot. Like blood and something else. Something old. The tracks ended at the mouth of an open crypt. It was built into the hill, stone and mortar crumbling around the arch. The metal gate hung open on one hinge, squeaking as the wind moved it. The name above the entrance was barely legible. F.D.R. family. The rest had been eaten away by rust. I stopped at the threshold. My flashlight beam fell inside. The floor was wet and uneven, covered in dirt and debris. The smell got stronger. My throat tightened. It wasn't just decay, it was sharp, metallic, alive somehow. I called out, my voice echoing off the walls. "Sheriff's department. Anyone in there?" Nothing. Only the faint sound of water dripping somewhere deep inside. I hesitated, staring at the darkness. My body screamed to leave, to get back in the car and drive away. But something else pulled me forward. Maybe it was duty. Maybe curiosity. Maybe that quiet, dangerous part of me that needed to know what was happening on that hill. I stepped inside. The air changed. Immediately. Heavy. Thick. The smell of iron burned my nose. My light caught the outlines of old coffins set into the walls, each sealed behind stone plates. Most were cracked open. The floor was scattered with fragments of bone and broken wood. I tried not to step on anything, but the ground was soft and uneven, and every move made a low crunch. Something dripped on my shoulder. I looked up. The ceiling was covered in dark stains that glistened under the light. I told myself it was just water seeping through the stone, but it didn't smell like water. Near the back of the crypt was a marble slab that looked like a table. There were scratches all over it, fresh ones. Long lines carved deep into the stone, as if someone had tried to crawl across it with nails or claws. The air felt wrong, like the space itself was alive and breathing slow. I could hear faint sounds I couldn't place, soft scraping, like something shifting in the walls. I tried to call in on the radio, but it just hissed back static. I moved closer to the slab, shining my light over it. That's when I noticed something written along the edge, faint under the grime. Return what was taken. The letters looked carved by hand, uneven and jagged. I didn't know what that meant, but the words made my stomach twist. Then I heard it, a single sound from behind me, a wet, dragging step. I turned fast, light shaking in my hand. The entrance was empty, but the floor showed a new footprint, deeper, sharper. I took a step backward, heart pounding, the flashlight beam trembling over the walls. I could hear breathing now, slow, heavy, coming from somewhere close. It echoed off the stone, impossible to tell where it came from. "Who's there?" I shouted. The breathing stopped. Then from somewhere deep in the dark, something whispered my name. It wasn't loud. It wasn't even clear. But it was my name. Drawn out slow, like someone testing the sound of it. I froze completely. The beam of my flashlight flickered, then went out. I smacked it against my palm, but it stayed dead. The darkness swallowed everything. My breath was loud in my ears. The air felt like it was pressing against me, thick and wet. Then I felt movement, just a brush, like fingertips along my sleeve. I bolted for the entrance. I stumbled out into the rain, gasping for air. The night felt wide and open again, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still behind me. Watching, waiting. I didn't stop running until I reached my cruiser. I threw the door open, slammed it shut, locked it out of habit. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely get the key in the ignition. When the headlights came on, I saw them. The same prints, those long, pointed tracks, now led straight from the crypt to where I stood. And they stopped right at my driver's side door. There was no one there, just the tracks, gleaming wet in the light. I drove off that hill faster than I should have. The rain chased me down the road, hammering against the glass, turning the world into streaks of gray again. My heart didn't stop racing until I reached the station. I didn't file a full report that night. Just a short one. Checked cemetery. No trespassers found. Same as before, but I couldn't stop thinking about that crypt. The smell, the carvings, the voice that said my name. I went back the next day after sunrise. I told myself it was just to double check. The sun made the hill look almost peaceful. The grass shimmered with dew. The stones looked harmless again. When I got to the back section, the crypt was there, but the gate wasn't open anymore. It was sealed. The hinges rusted shut, no footprints, no smell, like nothing had ever happened. I looked for that marble slab inside, but I couldn't even see through the bars. I did notice something, though. Near the base of the crypt, someone had pressed their hand into the wet earth. Not a print this time, just the outline of a palm. Deep, deliberate, and inside that print was something small and metallic. My badge. Clean this time. No rust. As if it had just been polished, I left it there. I didn't even touch it. I told the chief I was taking a few days off after that. He didn't ask questions. Probably thought I was burned out. Maybe I was, but sometimes late at night, I hear that voice again, whispering my name like it's trying to remind me of something. And when it rains, I swear I can smell iron in the air, like the hills still breathing, like the door I walked out of that night, never really closed behind me. I was halfway through my shift when the radio started acting strange. It was around 11:45 p.m., cold enough that the windows of the cruiser kept fogging from the inside. I'd been parked off County Road 11 for nearly an hour, watching the dark stretch of farmland that went on forever. Nothing ever happened out here. Just fields, fences, and the hum of the cruiser's engine filling the silence. Then the static came. At first it was faint, just a soft hiss through the radio speaker. I thought maybe the rain clouds rolling in were messing with the signal again. But the noise started breaking in and out like something was trying to come through. Then I heard it. A voice. Nyon. Copy! It was barely there. I leaned closer to the radio trying to make it out. This is Unit 12, I said. Repeat, who's calling? More static. Then again, that same voice. This time louder, strained like someone talking through water. Help. County Road 11, please. I sat up straight. Identify yourself, I said. Who is this? The radio went quiet for a moment. Then softer. He's not gone. The sound cut out completely. I stared at the radio, waiting for dispatch to check in, but nothing came. Just silence. The kind that sits too long. I tried calling in. Dispatch, this is Unit 12. I'm getting some interference on Channel 1. Did anyone else hear that? Static. I switched to the backup channel. Still nothing. The air inside the cruiser felt different suddenly. Heavy. Still. The kind of stillness you only notice when every sound stops at once. The wind, the insects, even the hum of the engine felt distant. County Road 11 stretched ahead in two thin lanes of cracked asphalt, vanishing into the woods. My headlights cut through the fog in short, weak beams. It wasn't my jurisdiction to investigate unverified calls, but something about that voice wouldn't leave me alone. The way it sounded, tired, broken, desperate, like someone saying their last words. So I pulled out onto the road. The tires hissed over the wet pavement as I drove. The fog got thicker, swirling in the beams like smoke. Every now and then I caught glimpses of the fields, barbed wire fences, tall grass bending in the wind, an old scarecrow slumped over like it was sleeping. A few miles in, the radio crackled again. Help? Please, copy that, I said quickly. This is Unit 12. What's your location? Silence. Then a faint whisper, too soft to make out. I turned the volume all the way up. He's still here. The voice was shaking now, not just scared, hopeless. Who's here? I asked. Are you hurt? The radio hissed, then cut to silence again. I slowed down, scanning the road ahead. There were no other headlights, no sign of anyone. The fog was so dense it looked like the world ended 50 feet in front of me. That's when I saw it, a flicker of red light through the mist. I thought it might be taillights. I eased forward until the shape came into view, an old patrol car. It was half off the road, tilted in a ditch. The light bar on top was flickering weakly, one broken bulb blinking every few seconds. I stopped the cruiser and got out. The air was cold enough that my breath fogged up immediately. The rain hadn't started yet, but the ground was slick with dew. The old patrol car looked like it hadn't moved in years. The paint was faded, the windows coated in grime. The driver's door hung open. I called out, "Sheriff's Department! Anyone here?" No answer. I shined my flashlight inside. The seats were covered in dust. The dashboard was cracked. The radio on the console was still on, light blinking faintly. I leaned in. "This is Unit 12, I said into my mic. "I've located an abandoned vehicle off County Road 11, possible unit car, looks decommissioned. No driver in sight." The moment I said it, my radio crackled again. Not dispatch this time. That same broken voice came through. "Don't let him see you." I froze. "Who is this?" No answer. Just breathing. Then a burst of static, followed by something that sounded like footsteps. Wet, dragging steps, echoing faintly through the speaker. My heart started pounding. I stepped back from the car, shining the light toward the fields. The fog was too thick to see more than a few yards out, but I could swear I saw something moving out there. A dark shape, low to the ground, shifting between the rows of grass. "Dispatch, do you copy?" I said. My voice was shaking now. "I need confirmation. Do we have any units out here tonight?" Nothing. Only the hum of the cruiser's engine behind me. I turned back toward the old patrol car. Something about it felt off now. The longer I looked, the more I realized the badge logo on the side wasn't ours. The font was older. The emblem outdated. It was a model we stopped using decades ago. The radio inside hissed again, and I stepped closer, just enough to hear it clearly. "You shouldn't be here." Then the sound of breathing. Not mine. Slow, heavy, and close. I turned around fast, shining my flashlight toward the road. Nothing. Just fog curling around the car, swallowing the light. When I looked back inside the patrol car, the radio light was off. Dead. That's when I noticed the ID tag hanging from the rearview mirror. A rusted nameplate, half covered in grime. I wiped it clean with my thumb. The letters were faint, but I could still make them out. Danner. M. The same name I'd only heard in stories. The missing officer from the 1960s. I stumbled back a step. The fog shifted then, like something moving through it. I thought I heard a whisper. Not from the radio this time, but from somewhere out in the field. It sounded like my own name. I got back in my cruiser and locked the doors. My hands were shaking as I tried to call dispatch again. This time, a voice finally came through. "Clean and clear. Unit 12, we've got you now." You went silent for a bit. "Everything all right?" I hesitated. I looked out at the fog again. The old patrol car was gone, just gone. I blinked hard, rubbed my eyes, and looked again. Nothing but empty road and wet grass. "Yeah," I said quietly. "Everything's fine." I drove back to the highway in silence, the static gone from the radio now. But the air inside the cruiser still smelled faintly of dust and iron. When I got to the station, I checked the logs. There hadn't been any calls from County Road 11 that night. No transmissions, no missing units, nothing. The dispatcher said I'd gone off. Radar for exactly 7 minutes. 7 minutes of silence, and when I rewound the dashcam footage to see what happened, it stopped, recording right before the voice. First came through, just black screen, but faintly, right before the video cut out. I could hear it again, that whisper through the static. "He's not gone." I didn't sleep. After that night, I told myself it was just fatigue. The mind playing tricks after too many hours alone on the road. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. That voice on the radio, the static, the way the old patrol car disappeared like it was never there at all. For 2 days, I kept checking the dispatch logs. No record of a call from County Road 11, no missing person reports, no mention of anyone named Danner in recent files. But when I searched the archives, there it was, an old newspaper clipping from 1973. Deputy Michael Danner presumed dead after patrol accident on Highway 37. The story said his vehicle was never found. That night, I went back on shift, same route. The highway felt quieter than usual. Even the wind sounded hollow. The same stretch of road that used to feel boring now felt wrong, like something about it was watching me. By midnight, the fog had returned. It rolled in slow, thick, and heavy, swallowing the tree line until the world looked small. Just my headlights, the yellow lines and darkness beyond it. Then came the call. The radio crackled softly, almost hesitant like it didn't want to speak. Unit 12. Respond! It was dispatch. But the voice sounded off, slower, distant, like it was echoing through a tunnel. Go ahead, I said. Report of a possible vehicle accident near mile marker 19. Caller didn't stay on the line. No further details. My stomach dropped. Mile marker 19 was only a few miles from County Road 11. Copy that, I said. En route. The drive was short, but it felt longer. The fog seemed thicker the closer I got. My high beams barely touched the edges of the road, and everything beyond looked soft and shifting like it was breathing. When the marker came into view, I slowed down. It was an old, faded green sign, the numbers almost erased by time. And right past it, I saw the reflection of metal in the ditch. I pulled over, killed the siren, and stepped out. It was cold enough that the air bit my skin. The sound of insects had died out again, just like before. All I could hear was the low hum of my cruiser idling behind me. The wreck was about 20 feet off the road. I moved closer with my flashlight, the beam slicing through fog and revealing shapes, broken glass, a twisted fence post, and a vehicle on its side. At first, I thought it was recent. But as I got closer, I realized the metal wasn't just dented, it was rusted through. The color, once white, had turned to a dull gray. The light from my torch glinted off a badge on the door, County Sheriff's Office. I wiped the mud away, and the lettering underneath made my chest tighten. Unit 412, the same old logo, the same design I'd seen on that patrol car by County Road 11. I took a step back, staring at it. This wasn't possible. The report said Danner's vehicle had vanished 50 years ago. No trace. And yet here it was. Overturned, rusted, half buried in dirt. I leaned closer to the shattered window. Inside, the seats were shredded, filled with dry leaves and cobwebs. The dashboard was warped, melted in places. The steering wheel looked fused to the column, but something was still glowing faintly under the dust. I reached in and brushed it clean. The old police radio? The light was blinking, dim but steady. I picked it up. The mic cord snapped from the rust, hanging loose like a dead vine. Still, the tiny red light on the base flickered weakly, as if waiting for something. Then softly, a voice whispered through the static. Please, help! I froze. My breath fogged the glass. Who is this? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Static again. Then, Unit 412? He's still out there. The air around me shifted. It felt like the world had just gone silent. Completely. Unnaturally still. Even my own heartbeat felt too loud. Deputy Danner? I said. Is that you? He doesn't stop. The voice broke into a soft crackle. Then a sound like metal scraping across gravel. Behind me, I spun around, flashlight shaking in my hand. The beam caught only fog and weeds bending in the wind. But then, something flickered in the reflection of the cruiser's headlights. A figure, standing just beyond the fog line. Tall, motionless, facing the road. I shouted, "This is law enforcement! Identify yourself!" No response. I blinked, and the figure was gone. The fog folded over the spot where it had stood, and everything went quiet again. My throat was dry. My fingers felt numb. I turned back toward the overturned car, but now the radio inside had gone dark. The red light was gone. I climbed back to the road, forcing my breathing to steady. My boots left wet prints on the asphalt. The fog seemed to follow, closing in tighter. When I reached the cruiser, I tried the radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 12. I've got an abandoned patrol vehicle near mile marker 19. Possible historic wreck. Requesting records check for Unit 412. Static, then the same voice. Don't look back." I dropped the mic. The sound didn't come from the radio this time. It came from behind me, a whisper, right by my ear. I turned, slow, afraid to see what was there. But all I saw was fog, only it wasn't fog anymore. It was moving, shifting against the light like smoke curling from a slow fire. And through it, a faint shape was forming, a person. I couldn't move. My body refused to listen. The shape stepped closer until I could see the faint outline of a uniform, a badge, and a pale face underneath. But the eyes weren't right. They looked empty, clouded over like glass. He opened his mouth, but no sound came. Just that low hum, like a radio caught between stations. Then his jaw twitched once. Twice, before he whispered, "He's still here." The light from my flashlight flickered, and when it came back on, he was gone. Just fog again. I stumbled backward into the cruiser, slammed the door, and hit the gas. The tires screeched on wet asphalt as I tore down the highway, heart pounding so hard it hurt. For a long time, I didn't speak, didn't breathe. I just drove. When I finally reached the intersection where the fog began to thin, I looked in the mirror. For a second, just 1 second, I thought I saw flashing red lights behind me. Old ones. The kind we don't use anymore. By the time I reached town, they were gone. I filed the report the next morning. They sent a team out to mile marker 19. I waited by the radio all day for the update. When it came, the deputy's voice sounded confused. "There's nothing out here, sir. No wreck, no vehicle. Just a field." I told him to check again. He swore he did. Said the only thing they found was an old road marker that had fallen into the ditch, a piece of metal with a faded number scratched into it. That night, I listened to my dashcam audio again. No images this time, just sound. For a while it was quiet, just the hum of the engine. Then, right before I turned back toward the car, a faint whisper came through the static. It wasn't Danner's voice, it was mine. He's still out there. I didn't go back to the highway the next night. I told my supervisor the fog was too thick, the roads unsafe. It wasn't a lie, not exactly. The air still felt heavy out there, like the weather itself was holding its breath. But the real reason was sitting in the pit of my stomach. That old, rusted patrol car and the voice that came through the radio. I couldn't shake it. Couldn't stop thinking about that number. 412. The next morning, I went into the records office. It's a small brick building behind the main sheriff's department. No windows, just old filing cabinets and the faint smell of dust and toner. I asked the clerk on duty, "Marcy, to pull the dispatch logs from 2 nights ago. She's been there longer than anyone. Keeps everything organized down to the minute." She frowned as she flipped through the digital entries. "Accident near mile marker 19, you said?" "Yeah," I told her. "A possible rollover. Came in around midnight." She scrolled, the screen reflecting in her glasses. Then she shook her head. "There's nothing here for that time." The last logged call was at 11:42. Domestic dispute out near Hollow Creek. I felt a chill crawl up my arms. "Can you check the radio backup?" "The voice recordings?" She nodded, clicking through the system. It took a minute. Then another. Her expression didn't change, but her eyes started darting faster. "There's nothing there either," she finally said. "It's blank." "Blank?" She leaned closer to the monitor. "Usually there's at least static. This one just cuts out completely between 11:50 and 12:20, like the recording didn't exist. That didn't make sense. Every transmission we make, even interference, gets logged automatically. For it to go missing meant one of two things: a system failure or someone deleted it. But the thing was, I'd heard the call. I'd responded to it. I asked her to check older archives, anything about Unit 412. She hesitated. "That's really old, like pre-digital. Might take a bit." I waited. I remember the sound of the air conditioner buzzing overhead, the faint hum of fluorescent lights. Everything felt too bright, too still. After 10 minutes, she came back with a cardboard box, the kind with yellowed labels and paper files curling at the edges. She set it down on the counter. Coughing from the dust that puffed out? "Here, these are dispatch records from the 70s. Only reason we kept them was for historical audit stuff." I started flipping through the pages. Each log had neat typewriter entries, incident times, call signs, units dispatched. Then I saw it. May 17th, 1973, Unit 412. Officer, Deputy Michael Danner. The report said, responded to 911 call from County Road 11. Caller reported a man walking along the highway. Unit failed to respond to follow-up. Last transmission recorded at 12:04 a.m. My chest went cold. That was the same night, same road, same unit number. I turned the page. There was a handwritten note stapled to the back. The ink had bled over time, but I could still make it out. Vehicle and officer missing. Presumed deceased. I just stood there staring at it. The sound of the fluorescent lights started to buzz louder in my head, like a ringing that wouldn't stop. Marcy asked me something. I don't even remember what. I just grabbed the report and asked to make a copy. She looked nervous, but nodded. On my way out, I passed the photo wall, the one they keep near the front desk, filled with old department pictures. Retirements, award ceremonies, memorials. I stopped halfway down the hall. There, in the second row from the top, was a black and white photo labeled 1973 Department Roster. There were maybe a dozen officers in that picture, standing in front of old patrol cars. I leaned closer until I found him. Third from the left, Deputy Michael Danner. Same badge, same patch, same face I'd seen through the fog. I left early that day. Drove home with the windows down, even though it was raining. I needed the air, the noise, something to remind me I was still in the real world. But the thing about silence is, once you've heard something in it, you start hearing it everywhere. That night, around midnight, I woke up to a faint sound in my house. Not loud, just a soft crackle, like static. It was coming from the kitchen. I followed it, barefoot, half asleep. The sound got louder the closer I got. When I flipped on the light, my police radio was sitting on the counter, the red light blinking. I didn't remember leaving it on. At first, it was just static. But then I heard a voice. Faint, like it was buried under snow. This is Unit 412. My hands went cold. County Road 11. Requesting backup. It was the same voice. The same one from 2 nights ago. I reached out and grabbed the mic. My voice came out shaking. Who is this? The line cracked and hissed. Then, can't see him anymore. The man on the road? My heart was pounding. Where are you? I said. Deputy, where are you now? No response. Just breathing. Then, a whisper right next to the speaker. He found me. The radio went dead. I stood there for a long time, just staring at it. I didn't sleep again that night. Every shadow in the house felt like it was leaning closer. Every sound felt like a voice hiding beneath something else. The next morning, I took the radio to the tech officer at the station. He ran diagnostics, power test, frequency check, memory log. After a few minutes, he looked up at me confused. This unit's wiped, he said. No call data, no recordings, nothing. Looks like it's never been used. I told him that couldn't be right. He showed me the serial number stamped under the base, manufactured 1984. My radio was newer than the voice that came through it. That night, I drove back out to Highway 37. I don't know why. Curiosity, guilt, fear, maybe all of it. The fog was waiting for me again, sitting low on the fields like it had been waiting for the sun to set. I parked near mile marker 19. The sign was gone. The ditch was filled with rainwater. Nothing left of the wreck. No tracks, no debris, no sign I'd ever been there. But when I stepped out, I noticed something strange. The air smelled faintly of iron. And under the wind, I could hear it again. The whisper of static, somewhere far off. I walked down the shoulder, following the sound. Every few steps it faded, then came back. Like someone was tuning an invisible radio. Then I saw it, half buried in the mud near the fence line, at a metal badge. Tarnished, cracked, but still legible. Danner. I turned it over in my hand. The metal was freezing cold, colder than it should have been. Behind me, the radio in my cruiser came alive on its own. Unit 412, come in. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat wouldn't work. County Road 11. Requesting response. The voice grew louder, clearer. Like he was standing right behind the mic. Then another voice joined in. One I didn't recognize. Unit 12, it said softly. You shouldn't have come back. I turned toward the cruiser. The fog had thickened again, curling around the headlights like it was alive, and through it, for just a second, I saw something moving. A shape in a uniform, not walking, just standing, watching me. Then, silence. The radio cut off. The fog began to thin, and I realized the badge in my hand was gone. I never told anyone about that night. I just filed the report as equipment interference and misidentified debris. But every time I drive down Highway 37 now, the radio hums softly like it's listening. And sometimes, when the static gets loud enough, I hear him again, not calling for help anymore. Just repeating the same words over and over, Unit 412. Still on scene? The first thing I remember about that night was the sound. Not the rain itself, but the way it touched everything. Soft, constant, like fingers drumming against the roof of my truck. It was the kind of rain that never stopped, just stayed there, hanging in the dark, thick enough to blur the headlights and swallow the road. My shift started at 10 p.m. sharp my first week working nights. First time patrolling Highway 37 alone. I told myself it was just another stretch of asphalt, but the locals like to talk. You'd hear it at the diner. Drivers claiming the fog down there moved like it was alive, or that they'd seen headlights vanish in the distance without ever finding a car. I didn't believe any of it. Not then, I was still new. Still trying to prove I could handle the quiet hours, the long miles, the isolation that came with the badge. The rain started heavy around midnight. The kind that makes your wipers squeal against the glass. I kept my speed low, tires humming along the wet road. The dashboard lights painted everything in that pale green glow. The radio, the speedometer, the worn leather of the steering wheel. It was peaceful in a strange way, empty. The kind of quiet that can either calm you or make you feel like something's wrong. I remember passing the Ridgefield turnoff and noticing how the rain didn't sound the same there. It came down harder but softer too, like it was being swallowed by the trees. There's a long hill near mile marker 14 where the forest opens up on both sides. When I reached the top, I could see nothing but mist and water ahead. No lights, no tail lamps, just that endless gray curtain. I pulled over for a minute to rest my eyes. The wipers kept sliding back and forth, a rhythm that felt almost hypnotic. I leaned back and just listened. The sound of rain against metal, the faint whine of the radio, my own breathing. I didn't realize how long I sat there until I looked at the clock. 12:27. It felt like I'd only blinked. The radio was silent except for the low hum of static. I picked it up anyway out of habit. Unit 12 on standby. All clear on Highway 37. Nothing. Just that faint hiss. Sometimes the line cuts out near the ridge. Bad signal, especially in storms. But that night the static felt different. It wasn't random. It almost sounded like someone whispering underneath it. Too soft to make out, but there. I turned the volume down and rubbed my eyes. Too many hours, I muttered. You're hearing things. When I looked up again, I saw something move past the edge of the light. Just a shadow, slipping through the rain. I thought maybe it was a deer, but then the motion stopped and didn't start again. I rolled down the window an inch, letting in the cold air. The smell of wet asphalt and pine filled the truck. I aimed the spotlight toward the tree line. Nothing. Just the fog shifting against the beam. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone out there. It's strange how silence can feel heavy, like it has weight. Like the world is holding its breath, waiting for something. I sat there until my fingers started to ache from gripping the wheel. Finally, I laughed under my breath and pushed the truck back into gear. "Welcome to night shift," I said to no one. The rain followed me the rest of the way down the highway. Every sign I passed looked older than it should have been, rusted, leaning. The mile markers seemed to change places, like I'd already passed them before. That's the thing about driving at night. You start to doubt what's real. You blink and wonder if that dark patch in the road is water or something else. By 1 a.m., I reached the county line, turned around, and headed back. I didn't see another vehicle the entire way. No headlights, no trucks, no animals. Just me, the rain, and the road stretching endlessly in both directions. Sometimes, that much quiet gets inside your head. You start to remember things you'd rather forget. I thought about my dad, how he used to work these same routes back in the day. He'd tell me stories when I was a kid, about long nights, strange radio calls, things he couldn't explain. I used to laugh at him. Now I wasn't laughing. When I stopped again, it was near the old gas station that shut down years ago. The sign was still there, half broken, swinging in the wind. I turned off the engine and just listened to the rain again. There's a certain peace in moments like that. The kind where the world feels small but safe. Like you're the only person awake for miles. And then, just as I started to believe that calm, the radio popped. A quick burst of static. Then another. Then a faint voice, distant, muffled, like it was coming from deep underwater. Unit 4! I leaned forward. Repeat last dispatch. Silence, then again. 4. 12. The voice was faint but familiar. Not one I recognized, but it sounded official, steady, like another officer. Copy that, I said, trying to stay calm. Unit 12 responding. Identify your location. Static filled the cab. Then through the noise. County Road 11. The sound cut out completely. I waited, staring at the radio. I could hear my own heartbeat now. The rain had slowed, tapping softer against the glass, almost gentle. I picked the mic back up. Unit 412, confirm. Say again, County Road 11. Nothing. I checked the logbook in the passenger seat. There was no Unit 412 listed on duty that night. No one had that call sign in our district anymore. I tried dispatch again. Control, this is Unit 12. I just received a transmission from Unit 412. Please confirm active roster. The response came a moment later, clear this time. Negative, Unit 12. No active 412. Closest is 418 out of Pike County. I stared at the radio, the rain pooling against the windshield like it was trying to hide what I'd just heard. Copy that, I said softly. Must have been interference, but my voice didn't sound convinced. As I started the engine again, the truck lights flickered. Once, twice, then held steady. I backed onto the road, the tires splashing through the shallow water. That's when I saw it. A reflection, faint, in the side mirror. Headlights. At first, I thought another vehicle had finally appeared behind me. But when I looked again, there was nothing there. Just black road and fog. The reflection stayed, though, flickering in the glass like it had burned itself in. 2 lights, steady, following. I tried to shake it off. Probably just a trick of the rain, I told myself. By the time I reached the hill again, the lights were gone. I drove home that morning with the radio off. Didn't even check in at the end of shift. I just needed quiet, the kind that didn't whisper through static. When I got home, I parked the truck and sat there, listening to the rain on the roof again. It sounded the same as before. Calm, steady, endless. But somewhere underneath it, I thought I could still hear that voice. County Road 11. I turned the radio off completely. But the sound didn't stop. It was faint now. Coming from outside. From the dark. From the road. Didn't plan to go back the next night. But I couldn't stop thinking about that radio. Call County Road 11 Unit 412. A voice that shouldn't have been there. I told myself it was interference. Or maybe a prank. But the more I thought about it, the more it crawled under my skin. I kept replaying it in my head. That soft, broken static. The way the words dragged through the noise. By the time my next shift started, I'd convinced myself I needed to check it out. Highway 37 was quiet again that night. Too quiet. Even the rain had stopped, though the clouds still hung low enough to touch the trees. The air felt heavy, thick with that smell of wet earth and asphalt. I rolled down my window and let the cold air in. Somewhere in the distance I could hear frogs, faint, rhythmic, like a pulse hiding in the dark. When I passed mile marker 19, my headlights caught something strange on the right side of the road. I slowed down, thinking maybe a deer had wandered close to the ditch. But it wasn't an animal. It was a headstone, just sitting there in the grass, crooked, half sunk into the mud. I pulled over and got out. The beam from my flashlight cut through the fog in thin streaks, landing on the pale stone. The name was hard to read. The rain had washed most of it away. But the date was clear. I frowned. There was no cemetery anywhere near here. The closest one was 7 miles north, past the old church. I walked a little further, shining the light along the tree line. More stones? Half a dozen of them, all lined up unevenly along the ditch. Each one cracked, tilted, or sunken into the earth like they'd been dropped here and left to sink. I checked my GPS. Nothing. The map showed a blank stretch of road. No structures, no memorial markers, nothing. I don't know why, but I felt the need to count them. There were 9 in total, 9 headstones, each with different names, and the same year. The year before I was born. The same year my dad worked this route. For a moment, I thought about calling dispatch, but what was I going to say? Hey, there's a cemetery growing out of the ditch? No, I'd sound insane, so I marked the spot in my logbook. Just a small note next to the time. 12:47 a.m. Unidentified memorial stones near marker 19. I took one last look before heading back to the truck. The fog had started to move again. Slow, rolling waves of gray that made it hard to tell where the ground ended and the air began. When I looked back at the road, I could have sworn one of the stones wasn't where it had been before, just slightly turned, like it had followed me. I told myself it was the fog. Just light playing tricks. Still, I left fast. The next night, I drove the same stretch again, not because I had to, but because I needed to know. The fog was thinner this time, and the moon hung low, pale and wide like an eye watching from above. I slowed down near marker 19, half expecting to see nothing, but the stones were there, all 9 of them. Only now. They weren't along the ditch anymore. They were closer to the road, lined up perfectly. Straight, clean, like someone had arranged them in the night. I stopped the truck and sat there for a long time, just staring through the windshield. My hands were tight around the steering wheel, palms sweating. When I finally stepped out, the night felt wrong. Still, too still. I aimed my light across the stones again. Same names, same dates, but something else stood out now. Fresh dirt beneath one of them. Like someone had dug there recently. I crouched down. The soil was soft, dark, wet. When I brushed my glove against it, the smell hit me. Rot and earth and something faintly metallic. Blood, maybe. I stood up quick. The wind picked up, brushing through the trees. The headstones seemed to tilt slightly as it moved, like they were bowing. I turned back toward the truck, but for a second, I didn't see it. The headlights were still on, but the shape of the vehicle wasn't there. Just light, floating in the mist. Then, as the fog shifted, the outline appeared again. My own truck, right where I'd left it. I didn't realize how hard my heart was pounding until I heard it in my ears. I climbed back inside and locked the doors, even though that didn't make much sense out here. The engine idled, the radio whispering low static again. I looked at the stones one last time before I left. 9 of them, still, silent. When I got back to the station that morning, I tried to bring it up to Sergeant Miller, but the words came out all wrong. Gravestones, I said. By the highway. They're just there. He gave me this look. Half concern, half amusement. You mean memorial markers? He asked. We've got some up by Route 9, old crash sites. No, I said. Not memorials. These look like graves from the 70s, he sighed. You've been pulling long nights. Maybe lay off the caffeine. Highway 37 can mess with your head. He walked away before I could say more, but that wasn't what bothered me. What got under my skin was the small smile he gave when he said it, like he already knew. That night, I drove out again, against my own better judgment. The fog was gone completely, replaced by a cold, empty sky. The stars looked harsh, sharp points of light cutting through the black. When I reached the same spot, my stomach dropped. The stones had moved again. Now they were right at the edge of the pavement, perfectly lined up. The closest one no more than a few feet from my tires. I sat there, unable to breathe. And then I noticed something carved into the first stone that hadn't been there before. A small engraving at the bottom, my last name. At first I thought I was imagining it, but the more I looked, the clearer it became. My name, etched deep into the old marble, as if it had always been there. The date below it read 2024. I stumbled backward, eyes darting across the others. Each one had changed. The names were different now. The same format, the same stone, but every name was from someone I worked with, every officer in our department. And the year was always the same, 2024. My throat went dry. I got in the truck and drove without thinking. I didn't look back. Not once. The next day, I called Miller again. I didn't even try to explain this time. I just asked if there was ever a burial site near Highway 37. He paused before answering. Why do you ask? I told him about the stones, about the names, about mine. He was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, "You shouldn't go back there." His voice was flat, calm. But there was something behind it. Something that didn't sound like concern. I asked again if he knew anything. He said, "My dad worked that route, same as yours." He told me once. Some places remember things differently. They hold on. I didn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about that dirt, that smell, the way the names had changed. Around 2 a.m., I heard something outside my window. A soft scrape, like stones sliding over concrete. I froze. When I looked out, the street was empty. Just my patrol truck sitting under the streetlight. But in the yard, near the edge of the grass, there was something pale sticking up from the dirt, a corner of stone, weathered, cracked, and even from the window. I could see it, faint letters carved into the surface, my name. I didn't sleep much after that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the stones, 9 of them. Then 10. Then one more rising just a little higher than the rest, and my name carved in weathered gray. The next few nights on Highway 37 were quiet again, at least on the surface. No new calls, no strange lights, no static on the radio, just that long stretch of blacktop cutting through the woods, the same lonely hum of tires against wet pavement. It almost felt normal, almost, but the rain came back, and with it, something else. It started as a faint sound under the road, like water moving through a pipe, deep and muffled. At first I thought it was runoff or the soil draining after the storm, but then it grew louder. It wasn't water. It was voices, soft at first, whispering, not words I could make out, just the rhythm of speech, rising and falling beneath me. I turned off the wipers, killed the radio, and listened. The sound didn't stop. It came from below the asphalt, like a conversation happening under the ground. I leaned out the window, rain hitting my face, my flashlight barely cutting through the mist. The voices seemed to shift when I moved, following the truck, just under the tires. I told myself I was imagining it, that maybe it was air in the drainage lines or the wind hitting the culverts just right. But the longer I sat there, the clearer the sound became. They weren't random. They were calling something. Not loud. Not screaming. Just calling. A name. Mine. I threw the truck into gear and drove. Faster than I should have. The sound followed for a few seconds, then faded. When I finally stopped near the county line, my hands were shaking. I sat there watching the rain slide down the windshield, trying to slow my breathing. My reflection in the glass looked pale, almost hollow. Like I'd aged overnight. I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. But the next night it happened again. It was raining harder this time. Thick sheets slapping against the hood, the sky flashing white every few seconds. I kept my radio on, just to have another sound to focus on. But even through the static, I could hear it. The murmuring, the movement, like something crawling beneath the pavement. At first, it was just one voice. Then 2, then more. They rose and fell like waves, sometimes clear enough that I could almost make out phrases. Still here. He knows. I can't leave the road. My stomach turned. The air inside the cab felt thick, humid, like I was breathing through water. I drove to the same spot near mile marker 19, that cursed stretch of highway. The rain hit so hard it blurred the road ahead. I could barely see 10 feet in front of me, but I could hear them and louder than before. I stepped out of the truck. The air smelled of iron and mud. My boots sank into soft earth at the shoulder, the rain dripping from my cap in heavy beats. The voices were coming from under my feet. I crouched, pressing a hand against the ground. It was cold and trembling. It felt like something was moving just below the surface, not deep, maybe a few feet down. And then there was a knock, 3 times. Slow, deliberate. Knock, knock, knock. I froze. The hair on my arm stood straight up. Another knock followed, closer this time, right beneath my boots. Then a voice, clear, soft, familiar. It said, "You're late." I stumbled back so fast I nearly fell. My flashlight dropped into the mud, beam flickering across the road. The voice didn't come again, but I could still feel the vibration under the ground, faint, steady, like something breathing below the surface. I backed toward the truck, not taking my eyes off that patch of earth. When I climbed inside, the cab felt smaller than before, like the air itself was pressing against me. I started the engine, but for a split second, the headlights didn't come on. In that brief darkness, I thought I saw movement in the ditch, a shape rising, slick with rain. But when the lights flicked back on, there was nothing, just mud and water and the low whisper of the storm. I drove back to the station, shaking. Miller was on desk duty again. He saw my face and frowned. "You look like hell," he said. I told him what I'd heard. Not all of it, just enough to make sense. He stared at me for a long time. Then he said something that chilled me. "Did you stop near the stones?" I didn't answer. He didn't wait for one. "Don't go there again," he said low. "No matter what you hear." I asked him why, but he just turned away. His jaw tightened. I could tell he knew something. Maybe something his father told him. "Same as mine once warned me. Some things get buried for a reason," he said. "Leave them where they are, that was it." That was all he'd say. But I didn't leave it. 3 nights later, I was back. The rain had returned, steady and constant, like the sky was trying to wash something away. The highway was empty. My headlights cut across the slick asphalt, the reflection of the white lines twisting in the puddles. I stopped near mile marker 19 again, right where I'd heard the voice. I opened the door, and I listened. At first, there was only the rain. Then, faint, beneath it, the murmurs returned. I knelt down, pressing my ear close to the ground. The sound came sharp and sudden, a woman's voice, closer than ever. "Help me," she whispered. My throat went dry. "Who are you?" I said, barely audible. No answer. Then a deep sound, like soil shifting, something heavy dragging through the mud beneath the pavement. "Please," she said again. "It's dark down here." Lightning flashed, and for an instant I saw the road shimmer, like the surface of water. Then came another voice, male, rough, distant. Don't listen to her. It came from somewhere deeper, echoing through the layers of earth. "Go home," he said, "before it pulls you in." I stumbled back toward the truck, rain soaking through my jacket. The ground under my boots pulsed, not shaking, but moving in slow waves, like something alive was shifting beneath it. As I reached for the door, the voice came again, the woman's voice. "Sharp and desperate. Please don't leave me down here." The road cracked, just slightly. A thin line running between my feet. A faint smell rose from it. Not rot, but wet iron. Blood. The sound below grew frantic, overlapping whispers like a crowd trapped beneath the surface. I backed away, my heart pounding so hard I could taste metal in my mouth. Then, just as suddenly as it started, everything stopped. The voices, the movement, the rain. Silence. Even the engine had gone quiet. I climbed inside the truck, locked the doors, and stared at the crack in the road through the windshield. For a moment, I thought I saw something inside it, a hand, pale and motionless, pressing up through the dark. Then the rain came back, harder than before. By the time I reached the station, my clothes were soaked through. I went straight to the back office and pulled up the county maps, trying to find something, anything, about what was buried near. Highway 37, I found it after an hour. A single line in an old report from 1978, site of flood collapse. Ridgefield Road Extension Project terminated. Casualties 9 workers. Buried alive when the ground gave out. 9 headstones. The same stretch of road, and when I looked closer, I saw the project date. October 3rd, 1978. The exact same night as that old patrol car I found overturned near the mile marker. The voices below weren't just echoes. They were still there, still calling. And sometimes, when the rain hits just right and I'm sitting alone in my patrol truck, I can hear them again, only now. They don't say my name, they whisper something else. Join us. I woke up that night with the rain already falling. Hard. Sheets of it slapping against the roof, drumming on the pavement outside. The kind of storm that makes your bones ache before you even get out of bed. I didn't want to go out. I wanted to stay home, drink coffee, wait for it to pass. But I couldn't. Not after the voices beneath the road. Not after the stones. Not after my name carved into the dirt and stone and the memory of that one crack in the asphalt. So I put on my jacket and boots, grabbed my flashlight, and drove back to Highway 37. The cab was warm, but the rain fogged the windows. I wiped them off with the back of my sleeve and turned onto the dark stretch near mile marker 19. It was quiet. Too quiet. No cars, no wind. Just rain hitting the metal roof, rhythmically like it was counting down. I slowed down near the ditch where the first stones had appeared. I'd walked past them once before, but this time I could see them even in the rain. Standing upright, lined up along the shoulder. 9, 10, 11. My heart started pounding. I stepped out and shined my flashlight. The mud squelched under my boots, and the scent of wet earth and iron hit me immediately. I walked along the row of stones, counting them. 1, 2, 3. And then I froze. There it was. My name, carved into a headstone that hadn't been there before, and below it, a date. Tonight. Exactly tonight. The rain fell harder, drumming against my cap, running down my neck. I swallowed, feeling bile rise in my throat. My hands shook as I brushed the mud away, trying to make sense of it. It was impossible. I should have laughed or called someone. But I couldn't. I couldn't move. Every instinct in me told me to turn and run. Every logical part of my brain screamed at me to get in the truck, drive back to town and pretend I hadn't seen anything. But my feet stayed rooted in the mud. The inscription was clear. My name. My badge number. My date of death. Tonight. I dropped to my knees, heart hammering. My flashlight slipped from my hands, casting a weak, flickering light across the other stones. Each one looked older now, heavier somehow, as if they were waiting. The rain seemed to gather in a hollow around me. It wasn't just falling from the sky. It was rising from the ground. Wet mist curling around my legs, soft, clinging, suffocating. I reached out to touch the stone. The surface was cold, slick with rainwater. My fingers traced the carved letters, and I felt a vibration, not from the earth, but from the stone itself. Low, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. Then I heard it, soft at first, whispering beneath the rain. Unit 412. Unit 412. The voices I'd heard under the ground before, now here, around me. Rising from the stones, from the mud, from the air itself. Tonight? Tonight. I scrambled backward, boots slipping in the mud. My hands hit the nearest headstone, not mine. And the stone shifted under my touch, tilting slightly as if acknowledging me. I ran. Back to the truck. My fingers were numb, my lungs burning. I fumbled with the keys, hands slick with rain, mud, and sweat. The engine started with a roar. I slammed it into drive and tore onto the highway, and then I saw them. Headlights. Not in front, not behind, but all around me. Faint, glimmering through the rain, each one moving closer with every heartbeat. I glanced in the rearview mirror. Nothing. Forward, nothing. But the feeling of being watched, of being surrounded, didn't leave. I pressed the accelerator harder. The rain blurred into streaks, the pavement reflecting in sheets of silver. My breathing was ragged, wet, harsh. Then I heard my name again. Soft, almost gentle. Don't fight it. I slammed my hand on the horn, screaming into the storm, trying to wake myself up. But it wasn't a dream. The next mile passed in a blur. Every shadow on the roadside looked like a figure. Every ripple in the puddles looked like eyes. I reached mile marker 22 and slammed on the brakes. The truck fishtailed in the mud, tires squealing. My heart pounded in my ears. I looked back. A single headstone sat in the ditch, alone. The rain washed across it in waves, and my name gleamed in the wet reflection of the headlights. I couldn't move. I kept staring until the rain started to beat harder, the wind cutting across the cab. The reflection of my name rippled, and in the dark I thought I saw the faintest shape, a figure standing behind the stone, watching me. I tried to start the engine. Nothing. Dead. Then the whisper came. Right beside the cab. Soft, dry, like leaves brushing against glass. "Come, join us." I opened the door. Cold air hit me like knives. The figure was gone. Only the stone remained. My name carved deep into it, my date below it, etched in a way that I knew I couldn't survive. I stumbled backward, chest heaving, mud soaking my knees. I glanced toward the forest. The trees bowed in the wind, fog curling low. And then, from the shadows, I heard movement. Not a person walking, but something sliding along the ground, watching, waiting. The stone didn't move, but I could feel it, heavy, pulling. I ran to the cab, but the truck didn't start again. The headlights flickered once, twice, and then went out. In the darkness, I could hear them. Hundreds of whispers rising from the road, the ditch, the ground itself. Every voice I'd ever heard, every name I'd seen on those stones calling me, Unit 412. Join us. Tonight. My chest heaved. I thought of calling for backup, but I knew there was no one coming. Not tonight. I thought of my family, of the town, of the quiet nights I'd patrolled alone. It felt like a lifetime ago. The rain started pounding harder. I dropped to my knees beside the stone. My reflection in the wet marble. My own terrified face staring back, and then I realized it wasn't just a reflection. The stone began to crack. Tiny fissures at first, then wider. Shards of marble falling into the mud. A hand reached out, pale, cold, wet. I screamed, trying to pull back. But the ground beneath me shifted, pulling me closer. The whispering became a roar, voices all around me now. "Join us!" I closed my eyes, heart hammering. I felt the cold grip my shoulders, my legs, my arms. The stone touched my chest. The air smelled of earth and iron and rain and something older, and then everything went still. I don't know how long I stayed there. Minutes? Hours? It felt like forever. When I opened my eyes, the rain had stopped. The night was calm again. The road was empty. The fog had lifted. The stone was gone. But my name, my date, it wasn't carved in stone anymore. It was carved in my mind. And in the quiet of Highway 37, I knew one thing. Tonight had marked me, and I would never be the same again. The final shift had ended. The night was still, almost unbearably quiet until the radio hissed. Not the usual static, not the soft hum that comes from driving long stretches of blacktop. This was sharp, broken, like someone was speaking from underwater, distorted and close, yet impossibly far. I was halfway through my first night shift on Highway 37, the kind of shift where time stretches like wet taffy and every mile feels heavier than the last. The dashboard glow painted the interior of the truck in sickly green light. The rain had stopped hours ago, but the road still shimmered under the streetlights, slick and endless. The radio popped again, cutting through the silence like a knife. Unit 12. Allie, reporting. Need assistance. I froze, fingers tightening on the wheel. My stomach sank. There was no alley anywhere near Highway 37, not on any updated map, not on any satellite, not even in the old records we kept at dispatch. I keyed the mic. Unit 12, repeat your location, over, static. Then medalley behind. Old warehouse, don't move. The voice was strained, panicked. It sounded human but distant, like someone calling through decades. I frowned. The old warehouse district had been demolished years ago, replaced with a strip mall. Nothing remained but cracked concrete and memories. I drove slower, scanning the roadside. The streetlights flickered, casting long shadows across empty lots. I passed where the warehouse should have been, only there was nothing. Nothing but a narrow gap between two brick buildings. I stopped. The radio hissed again. Help, unit. 412, alley. The voice sounded familiar. My stomach twisted. I remembered something. A report buried in the logs years ago. Unit 412, disappeared, never found, no trace. 40 years ago, I pressed my hand to my forehead. My pulse thundered in my ears. Logic told me to turn around, call dispatch, leave it alone. But curiosity, or maybe fear, made my fingers grip the wheel tighter. I edged closer to the alley that didn't exist. In the headlights, I could see only a narrow slit between two old brick walls, wet from earlier rain, dark and empty. I stepped out of the truck, flashlight cutting a thin beam into the darkness. The alley smelled of damp stone and rusted metal. Nothing else. I took another step. My boots echoed against the cracked concrete. The radio hissed again. This time, a single clear word. Stop! My hand froze midair. The word came from the speaker, but also from behind me. My breath caught. I spun around. Nothing. Just the empty road, wet and glistening. I glanced back at the alley. A shadow flickered at the far end. Not solid. Not quite human. It moved just beyond the light. I swallowed hard. My throat felt dry, tight. I tried to steady my voice. Unit 12. I'm here. Identify yourself. The static came again, louder, and then the voice. Clearer, trembling. You shouldn't be here. I stumbled back toward the truck, flashlight slipping in my grasp. Rain began to fall again, though it hadn't been forecast. Not a heavy downpour, just soft drops soaking my jacket, slicking the concrete under my boots. I jumped into the cab, shaking, heart hammering. Headlights on, engine idling. I tried the mic. Dispatch, do you copy? Repeat, dispatch, copy Unit 12, static. Nothing else. I pulled up the map on the tablet. Alley didn't exist. It had been wiped from records decades ago. I ran a search for Unit 412. Nothing but old, faded reports. Case closed. Disappeared. Gone. The radio hissed one last time, faint but unmistakable. Join us. I slammed the tablet shut, yanking the truck into gear. The road seemed to stretch further than I remembered, the headlights cutting through the rain-slick night like knives. Every shadow moved. Every crack in the pavement looked like a hand reaching out. Every streetlight flicker felt deliberate, timed to the beat of my racing heart. I drove mile after mile, trying to convince myself I had imagined it. A long night. First shift jitters, stress, rain, fatigue, anything logical, but then I heard it again. My name, low and tremulous, whispering through the static. Unit 12? I spun the dial, trying to jam the frequency. Static roared louder, filling the cab, echoing against the roof. My vision blurred. Rain poured down the windshield. My hands shook. A shadow passed across the road. Just a glimpse. Just a flicker at the edge of my lights. Not human. Not solid. And then it was gone. I pulled over. The cab windows fogged. I pressed my face against the glass, trying to see. Heart hammering. Mind racing. The rain softened, almost silent now. Nothing. I keyed the mic again, voice trembling. Dispatch. Confirm alley behind old warehouse. Anyone there? No answer. Only the static hum I left. Not fast, not running. But I didn't look back. Couldn't. Back at the station, I logged the shift, careful not to include the alley or the voices. Only a note. Strange transmission on dead frequency. Unit 412 mentioned. Miller glanced at it and frowned. I didn't mention the rest. The whispering. The shadow. The alley that shouldn't exist. Some things, I thought, shouldn't be written down. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing it in my dreams. Faint static, a voice calling through time. Whispering from someplace beyond maps and records, Unit 412. The dead channel. And I knew deep down that I hadn't just heard it. I had been invited. The storm passed by morning. Sunlight streamed across the empty lots, washing the alley in pale gold. I looked once from the station parking lot. Nothing remained. Just brick, concrete, and shadows. I convinced myself it was over. It had to be, but sometimes late at night, when the wind is just right and the rain drums against the windshield, I can still hear that faint static, calling my name. Unit 12. Join us. I tell myself it's fatigue, memory, imagination, but deep down, I know the alley is still there, waiting. The rain hadn't let up all night. Not the soft drizzle that soaks your clothes slowly, but the kind that drives through your jacket, collects in your hair, and turns the world into a blur of gray and black. Highway 37 had always looked lonely in the daytime, but at night in the rain, it became a different place entirely, a place that felt like it wanted to swallow you whole. I was halfway through my shift when the radio crackled again. Just static at first, then a voice, ragged and uneven. Unit 9, partner's back seat. I frowned. My eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, automatically. Empty. Just the reflection of my own tired face. I pressed the mic. Unit 9? Say again. The static warped the words before I could hear them. Then the voice, clearer, whispered, please, help. It didn't make sense. Unit 9 had been retired for over 20 years. Partner? How could anyone be back there? I shook my head and told myself I was tired. First long night on this stretch of highway, eyes straining through rain and fog, imagination running wild. But I glanced into the mirror again. There was something there. A shape, shadowed, seated upright in the back of the cab. I blinked, and it was gone. I told myself it was a trick of the light. Maybe the reflection of a tree, the way the windshield wipers were moving. But I couldn't shake it. My hands gripped the wheel tighter. The highway was empty. Not another car in sight. The rain came down in sheets, blurring the white lines and puddles. My headlights reflected off the slick asphalt like silver knives. Then I saw it again. In the rearview mirror, a figure. A person. Uniformed, old-style police uniform. One we stopped using decades ago. Faded navy, brass buttons catching a flash of my headlights. Shoulder patch worn and fraying. I froze. My pulse raced. My hands trembled. Who's back there? I said aloud, though I knew no one could answer. The figure lifted a hand. A small, polite wave. Then it tilted its head as if asking a question. My stomach churned. This couldn't be real. It didn't make sense. I swallowed. Heart hammering. Unit 9's partner? Is that you? The figure nodded. Slowly. Deliberately. I tried to focus on the road, blinking the rain away from my eyes. My mind raced, piecing together fragments. Old reports. Unit 9. A partner declared missing. Never recovered. 40 years ago, and here they were. I gripped the wheel tighter, cold sweat running down my back. The radio crackled again. Don't stop. Keep moving. The words were fragmented, broken, choked with static. I tried to shake off the dread, but my eyes kept drifting to the mirror. I couldn't stop watching. Every curve of the road, every flash of light, every tree looked like it might hide something else waiting. And then the lightning struck. A jagged streak split the sky, illuminating the highway in a burst of pure white. For a split second, I could see the entire cab. The passenger seat was empty. The back seat, too. Gone. My stomach dropped. The radio went silent. The only sound was the rain hammering against the roof, the tires slicing through puddles. I slowed the truck, breathing hard. Eyes darting into the rear view. Nothing. Just my reflection staring back at me. Tired, wet, shaking. I pressed the mic again. Dispatch, did anyone just... Only static. The rest of the night was a blur. I drove faster than I should have, though the highway seemed to stretch farther than I remembered. Every shadow in the rain looked like movement, every tree like a watching figure. I kept glancing in the rear view, half expecting the figure to be there again, polite and still, smiling faintly. When I reached mile marker 19, my hands were numb on the wheel. I pulled over. The rain softened slightly, a drizzle now. I got out, shaking, and shined the flashlight across the cab. Nothing. No footprints, no figure, nothing but puddles and wet asphalt. I walked around the truck, checking the back seat. Still empty. The uniform. The person. Gone without a trace. The radio crackled faintly. I pressed my ear to the speaker. Don't! Stop! Follow. The voice. The same voice. And it wasn't coming from me anymore. Not inside the cab. Not from the radio. It was all around me, low and muffled, like it was riding the storm. I stumbled back into the truck, locking the doors. My chest ached. My head pounded. And I realized something I didn't want to admit. I wasn't imagining it. The highway, the storm, the figure, It was all real, and whatever it was, it wanted me to follow. I drove again, headlights cutting through the mist. Every mile felt longer than the last. Every shadow was alive, watching, waiting. I kept glancing in the rear view, terrified the figure might reappear, and then I saw it again. For just a second, as the road twisted under a bend, I caught the shape of a hand on the back of the seat. Pale, stiff, almost translucent. It didn't move, just rested there, watching me, waiting. I slammed my eyes shut. When I opened them, nothing. The rain started to fall harder. Visibility dropped. My breath steamed inside the cab. My knuckles were white on the wheel. The radio hissed again, low and insistent. "Don't leave tonight." I shook my head, trying to make sense, trying to convince myself I was losing it. But the memory of the figure, uniformed, waving politely, silent, stayed burned in my mind, a flash of lightning. And when my eyes adjusted, the back seat was empty again. I screamed into the night, more from relief than fear, but relief didn't last. The highway was empty. Yet I felt, followed, watched. Something in the back seat, maybe beneath it, maybe behind me. Something patient, waiting. I drove the rest of the night without stopping. Every turn of the wheel, every blink of the headlights, every flash of lightning reminded me of the figure, that polite, quiet presence. Gone when seen directly, returning when ignored. By dawn, the rain stopped. The highway cleared. The clouds parted enough for pale sunlight to bleed across the wet asphalt. I pulled into the station, drenched, exhausted, shaking. My shift log was blank. I wrote nothing of the passenger, the uniform, the whispers in the storm. I couldn't. No one would understand. No one would believe. But the rearview mirror haunted me. Even now, when I park my truck in the garage, I glance at it, half expecting a figure in old uniform, a polite nod, a hand raised in quiet farewell, waiting for the next storm to return. And I know, one night it will. The rain started late in the afternoon, soft at first, like the taps in the ceiling had sprung a slow leak. By the time I locked the morgue doors and glanced out toward Highway 37, it was falling like sheets of water, thick and relentless. The streetlights blurred through the downpour, their glow flickering in the puddles forming along the edges of the asphalt. I had been alone all day, which was normal, but the silence felt heavier than usual. Every small sound, the drip of water, the hum of the overhead fluorescent lights, seemed to echo in the concrete corridors of the lower morgue. I had just finished processing the last body when the power flickered. 1 second the lights were bright and clinical. The next, they dimmed to a sickly yellow, then went out entirely. The emergency generator kicked in with a low, shuddering groan, humming in the background like some restless creature. I sighed and rubbed my temples. I hate storms. They make the air thick, and the world feel like it's about to close in on you. I walked down the hall to the lower morgue, flashlight in hand. The beams of light danced across the tiled walls, illuminating pools of water on the floor. Some of the drains were overwhelmed by the rainfall seeping through the cracks in the foundation. The smell was subtle at first, damp concrete and the faint metallic tang of blood. But it settled into your nose, sharp and persistent, the kind that makes you swallow hard without realizing it. I waded carefully through the water, trying to avoid stepping in deeper pockets that had formed around the corners of the tables. I paused near the first body, the one on the slab closest to the window. His eyes were closed, though half of me wondered if they were truly closed. The rain outside hammered against the glass, tapping out a rhythm that was hypnotic and cruel. I thought about leaving, going somewhere else, anywhere else, but the morgue didn't allow it. Not tonight, not with the storm the way it was. The lights flickered again, and I caught a shadow at the far end of the hall. My heart jumped. It wasn't human. Not fully. My mind tried to reason. Perhaps it was just a trick of the light, the reflections off the water, but the shadow moved with a subtle certainty, like it had been waiting. I gripped the flashlight tighter. My breaths came short, shallow. I told myself I was imagining things. I had to tell myself that. I made my way to the drainage area where the water had pooled the deepest. It was worse than I thought. The storm had broken through part of the foundation. I could see the muddy current running along the floor, curling around the edges of the tables, carrying bits of debris with it. I dropped my flashlight for a moment to pull up the metal grate that covered the main drain. My fingers slipped in the cold, dark water, and I cursed under my breath. The generator's hum filled the space, constant and low, but it didn't help the fear creeping up my spine. I felt watched. The sensation started as a prickling at the base of my neck, then spread like ink through my chest. I glanced toward the far door again. Shadows clung to it, unnaturally thick. I could have sworn I saw a figure standing just outside, waiting for me to notice. My pulse quickened. I leaned down to check the drain and froze. There, in the reflection of the flashlight on the water, I saw him. A man, standing at the end of the hallway, though the hallway behind him should have been empty. His features were blurred, obscured by the rain streaming down the small window nearby, but his posture, the way he tilted his head slightly, waiting, was deliberate. He didn't move when I stepped back, didn't speak. I swallowed hard, trying to force down the rising panic. I told myself again it was a trick, maybe a reflection, a shadow, the angle of the water. But every instinct in me screamed that this was real. And then he moved, or rather he appeared closer, though I hadn't seen him walk. My throat went dry. My hands trembled as I lifted the flashlight, its beam slicing through the darkness, landing on him. The light revealed the same figure, a man, soaked from the rain, standing like he had been there the whole time, waiting for me. His eyes caught the light, and I noticed a strange glint, unnatural, sharp, something that made the hair on my arms stand on end. I stumbled back, tripping over the edge of the waterlogged floor. My heart hammered against my ribs. The air felt thick, heavy with electricity and wetness. I could hear the storm thrashing outside, and yet inside the morgue, it was as if time had slowed. I blinked, and he was closer still. Not walking, not running, just closer. Closer than should be possible. I scrambled to the nearest table, dragging the body with me as a shield. My mind raced. What do I do? Who is he? Why is he here? The water sloshed around my boots. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but the exits were blocked by debris from the flooding and the storm. I was trapped. The man didn't speak. He just watched. And then, for the briefest second, the light from the generator flickered, illuminating the corner of his face. Then I saw it. His mouth was moving, but no sound came out. His lips formed words I couldn't hear, words that felt like they were being pressed directly into my mind. My head throbbed. I wanted to scream, but the sound was caught somewhere deep in my chest. I stumbled backward, my back hitting the wall. I felt the water rise around my ankles, then my calves. The smell of damp concrete and decay grew stronger, clinging to me. My mind clawed at itself, trying to make sense, trying to find a rational explanation. There wasn't one. Nothing made sense. I backed into the far corner near the stairs, trying to put as much distance between me and him as I could. The water continued to rise slowly, curling around my legs like icy fingers. I couldn't move fast enough. My thoughts raced. He couldn't be real. He couldn't exist. But my eyes told me otherwise. Then in the flicker of the emergency lights, he was gone. Just gone. I stumbled forward, flashlight shaking, shining it over every surface. No one, nothing. Just the water, the flood, the shadows of the empty hall. My chest heaved. I wanted to laugh at myself, to tell myself it was just stress, just the storm, just the isolation, but deep down, I knew I hadn't imagined him. I stayed in that corner, shivering, listening to the storm rage above and the water drip around me. Hours passed, minutes, I don't know. Time became meaningless. Every shadow felt alive. Every drip of water was a heartbeat. And through it all, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still there, somewhere, watching, waiting for the next moment when I would be alone, weak, and terrified. I thought about leaving, about running into the storm, but I didn't. I couldn't. The morgue is a cage of my own making. I am the keeper, and yet tonight I feel like a prisoner. I stayed until the generator faltered again, throwing the hall into darkness. And in that blackness I felt it, his presence. Closer now, nearer than ever. My skin crawled. The storm outside hasn't stopped. It rages relentless. The rain has crept into every corner of the morgue, flooding the lower levels, and with it, my certainty that something Someone is here with me, watching, waiting. I can't see him now, but I know he is there. And I know that when the storm finally stops, he will not leave. I am alone, but not alone. The man on Highway 37, he is here. The storm had quieted only slightly by the time I dared to move again. Not gone, just hushed, like the world was holding its breath. My shoes squelched in the ankle-deep water as I edged toward the flooded section of the lower morgue. Every shadow felt alive, curling in the corners of my vision, twisting like smoke. The memory of the man on Highway 37 was still raw in my mind, a cold weight pressing against my chest. I tried to shake it off. I had to keep going. The water rippled with each step, disturbing bits of debris, chunks of plaster, and the occasional discarded cloth. I thought I saw a hand, a sleeve drifting in the current, and my stomach turned. My flashlight caught it just in time, only a ragged piece of curtain, sodden and meaningless. I shook my head, muttering to myself that I was imagining things, that my nerves were shredded from the storm, the isolation, the flooding. But the truth is, deep down, I knew I wasn't imagining everything. Something was here. I rounded a corner near the far end, where the morgue stored older gurneys and tables rarely used. The water was deeper here, knee-high, and I had to push through it, resisting the pull of unseen currents beneath the surface. That's when I saw it. A gurney floating, bobbing gently in the water. The metal frame glinted under the emergency lights, warped and rusted at the edges. My stomach clenched. It should have been empty, but I remembered moving it earlier today, pushing a body on it toward the freezer room. The body wasn't there. I froze, my flashlight trembling in my hand. The gurney drifted toward me as if guided by some invisible current. The water lapped against my knees, cold and shocking, and I forced myself to focus. Who had been on it? Where had they gone? The memory of the corpse I had just processed flickered in my mind. Was it him? The man from Highway 37? No, that made no sense. And yet, I stepped closer, the beam of light grazing the gurney. The straps that had once held a body were dangling, wet and slack. Nothing on the mattress suggested anyone had been lying there recently. No blood, no hair, nothing. And yet, the water around it was disturbed, swirling in odd patterns, as though something had left the gurney in a hurry. My pulse quickened. I gripped the sides of the gurney, trying to steady myself. The metal was slick with rainwater and condensation. My reflection shimmered across the wet surface, distorted and trembling, and for a moment, I imagined it was the man's face staring back at me. I recoiled. My hands left the gurney instantly. The silence that followed was deafening. The storm had quieted to the soft patter of water against the ceiling, but the morgue itself seemed to hold its breath. My chest ached with every heartbeat, loud and uneven in the hollow corridor. I wanted to leave, to run into the night, but something, fear, curiosity, or madness, kept me rooted there. I leaned closer, shining the flashlight under the gurney. The floor beneath the water was dark, murky, but I could make out footprints pressed into the silt. Small ones, large ones, they crisscrossed beneath the floating frame, ending abruptly in places where the water pooled deeper. I traced them with my mind, trying to understand, but they didn't make sense. Whoever had been here, or whatever, had moved with a precision that defied logic. I stepped back, my head spinning. The gurney shifted again, floating a little closer as though nudged by an unseen hand. My stomach lurched. I wanted to shout, call for someone, anyone, but the words stuck in my throat. My lips trembled. The fear was physical now, a weight pressing down on me, making it impossible to breathe normally. Then I saw it. A smear on the mattress. Faint, but there. Like someone had been dragged across the surface and disappeared into the water. I knelt, reaching out with a shaking hand to touch it. The fabric was cold, soaked, and utterly ordinary. No fingerprints, no clues. Just the eerie sensation that something had been there and was gone. I felt it before I saw it. The air shifted, colder now, thicker, like it carried the shape of someone else in the room. I could hear it faintly, the faintest splash, almost in rhythm with my heartbeat. I turned, flashlight sweeping across the hall. Nothing. Only the flicker of the emergency lights reflecting in the water. And yet, I knew I wasn't alone. The gurney floated again, moving toward the back wall this time. I followed, desperate to keep sight of it, my mind trying to force sense into the impossible. My feet slipped in the water, dragging me closer to the edge of the flooded area. The closer I got, the more I noticed it. Small droplets falling from the ceiling, dripping rhythmically, but in patterns that seemed deliberate, like a code. My chest tightened. My mind was unraveling. I crouched beside the gurney, gripping the mattress, trying to steady it. The water rippled beneath me, and I glimpsed something dark beneath the surface. Something that moved, not a reflection, not debris, a shape, large and sinuous just below the water, shifting with a purpose. My breath caught. My hands shook. I wanted to back away, to retreat, but fascination and horror held me there. Then I heard it clearly. A sound, soft at first, then growing louder, a groan, wet and guttural, coming from somewhere beneath the water. The gurney rocked slightly, as if responding to it. My mind screamed that I should leave, that I should run, but my body refused to obey. The sound became a whisper, words in a language I couldn't understand, pressing against my thoughts. My head throbbed. I stumbled back, clutching the wall for support. I told myself it was the storm, the wind through broken drains, the water itself. But I knew it wasn't. The groan had weight, intention. And then I saw it. Movement just beyond the edge of my flashlight. A shadow detached itself from the darker recesses, stretching, slithering along the water's surface. My stomach turned. My mind screamed, but I was frozen. The shadow passed beneath the gurney, disappearing, leaving a ripple of water that spread outward like a pulse. I reached for the flashlight, shaking violently. I tried to focus on the gurney to understand what was happening, but the water around it began to churn. The gurney tilted unnaturally, rocking on its own, and I swear I saw the faint outline of a figure beneath the water. Not solid, not entirely there. A ghostly blur, impossibly thin, as if it had been stretched between this world and another. Panic hit. I turned, backing away, but the water pulled at my feet, icy and insistent. I scrambled toward the nearest dry spot, slipping, falling onto my knees. The flashlight skittered across the floor, beam bouncing wildly. The gurney floated closer to me, though I had not touched it, and I felt a chill crawl up my spine. My breath came in short, sharp gasps. The fear was no longer just in my mind. It was a living thing, slithering through my veins. I wanted to scream, to call for help, but the sound caught in my throat. My own heartbeat thundered in my ears, louder than the storm outside. And then, in the brief flicker of the lights, I saw the empty spaces where the body had been. The mattress was bare, but the water around it, it moved differently, curling and twisting like it remembered. My stomach turned. I understood in that moment that the gurney had not just lost its occupant. Something had taken them. Something alive. Or something once alive. And now it lingered beneath the water, waiting. I stumbled backward, eyes wide, trying to rationalize it. Could it have been a rat? A cat? Something washed in from the storm? No. Nothing explained the footprints beneath the gurney, the way the water moved, the groan that pressed against my skull. Nothing. Only the certainty that whatever had been here, is here, was not finished. I sat there in the water, trembling, flashlight in hand, watching the gurney float slowly toward the far wall. I thought of the man from Highway 37, and a cold dread settled over me. Could it be the same thing? Could it be him, or something like him, taking what it wanted and leaving the rest behind? I couldn't answer. My mind refused to. All I could do was stare at the gurney, at the empty mattress, at the disturbed water, and wait. Time became meaningless. The lights flickered again. The gurney shifted, rocking slightly, though there was no wind inside. The water sloshed against my knees, and somewhere deep beneath the surface I felt it, brushing against my thoughts, pressing against the corners of my mind. Something watching, waiting, not yet done with me. The storm outside raged on, but inside, in the lower morgue, the real terror was quieter, patient, persistent. I don't know how long I stayed there, knees in water, gripping my flashlight like a lifeline. Hours? Minutes? All I know is that the gurney remained, floating, empty, and I knew, with a clarity that made my blood run cold, that its occupant had not gone willingly and would not be the last. The storm had eased, though the air was still damp and heavy, clinging to my skin and weighing my lungs. I had stayed in the lower morgue for hours, unable to leave, my eyes fixed on the floating gurney, my mind replaying every shadow, every ripple, every impossible movement. When I finally forced myself to climb the stairs back to the upper levels, I felt like I was leaving one world and entering another, though both were soaked with the same cold dread. The main morgue room was quiet, sterile, and still, the fluorescent lights flickering weakly as if they too were afraid. I tried to focus on my duties, checking inventory, making sure the bodies were still where they should be, but my mind refused to cooperate. Every drawer, every steel cabinet, every cold slab felt like it was hiding something that wanted to reach out to me. I passed the storage drawers near the wall, the ones labeled with tags for identification. Something about the neat order of them, the cold metallic smell, usually comforting, now felt threatening. I knelt beside one, idly flipping through the tags as if trying to find a distraction, when I noticed it, a tag that made my blood freeze. It was a name I knew. I blinked, leaned closer. My hands shook, the cold from the metal drawer biting into my palms. The tag was for a nurse from the hospital upstairs, still alive, still walking the halls, still talking, still working. Yet here, in front of me, a cold, precise slip of paper identified her as a corpse. My mind recoiled. I pinched the bridge of my nose, willing the words to dissolve, willing the tag to be a mistake, a misprint. But it wasn't. It stared at me, black ink on white cardstock, and I felt the air tighten around my throat. I could hear the faint hum of the fluorescent lights above, but in my ears it sounded like the tag itself was whispering. She is here. She is gone. She is not what she seems. I swallowed hard, my stomach twisting. Rational thought fled. My first instinct was to look up, to see her, to confirm that she was alive. I did. Down the hall I saw her, standing by the nurse's station, laughing softly at something a colleague said. She looked ordinary, human, warm, and yet as I stared, my mind wavered. I remembered the tag, remembered the cold metal, remembered the words etched so calmly on the paper. She shouldn't be there, and yet she was, moving as if she belonged, as if nothing were wrong. I felt my pulse quicken, a cold sweat forming at the back of my neck. I wanted to call out, to ask her about the tag, to demand answers, but my voice had abandoned me. My body felt heavier than it should, weighed down by fear and disbelief. The world around me seemed to pulse, shadows stretching along the walls, elongating in ways that made the floorboards groan beneath me. I returned to the drawer, compelled against my better judgment. I pulled it open fully this time, the metal scraping softly, echoing in the room. Inside, the compartment was empty except for the tags. Every tag was in order, meticulously cataloged until I reached hers again. I couldn't help but touch it. The paper was cold, colder than it should have been, damp almost, as if it had been in contact with something wet, something alive, or once alive. I remembered the gurney in the flooded lower morgue. I remembered the way the water had shifted, the shadow beneath it, the groan pressing against my thoughts. I couldn't shake the connection. This tag, this drawer, was part of the same thing, the same presence that had followed me, that had watched me through the storm. My stomach churned with the knowledge, but I couldn't look away. I had to know. A soft sound reached my ears, almost a sigh, almost a whisper. I turned sharply, flashlight trembling in my hands, but the hall was empty. The lights flickered again, throwing long shadows across the walls, making ordinary objects grotesque. The drawers along the sides seemed taller, the corners sharper, the darkness in the corners deeper. My eyes darted back to the tag. I had to see it again, had to confirm I hadn't imagined it. It was still there. My hands shook as I held it, the black ink clear against the white card. She is not dead. The words formed themselves in my mind as if the tag had been speaking directly to me. My rational mind screamed at me. It's a clerical error. It's a joke. It's not real. But the rest of me knew better. I could feel the truth of it pressing against my chest like icy fingers. I sat down heavily on the edge of a nearby table, the metal cold through my clothes. I tried to steady my breathing, tried to force my mind to think logically. The nurse was alive. I had seen her alive. The tag said otherwise, something in between or beyond. Something that didn't obey the rules I knew. The water from the lower morgue, the gurney, the shadow, the groan. It was all connected. My entire body screamed that it was. I closed my eyes briefly, trying to calm myself. Memories from the last few days crept in unbidden. The storm, the power failure, the floating gurney, the man on Highway 37. Each moment seemed separate, disconnected, until now. Now they all converged, like pieces of some monstrous puzzle. My fingers tightened around the tag. She is alive. She is dead. She is here. She is not. The contradictions made my mind reel. I opened the drawer again, scanning the other tags. Some names I recognized, some I didn't. Every tag was neat, orderly, but hers stood out, defiant, impossible. I could almost hear it humming, a low vibration against my fingertips. I dropped it onto the table. The sound echoed like a hollow heartbeat in the silent room. I wanted to leave. I wanted to run upstairs, confront her, scream until someone believed me. But I couldn't. My body wouldn't move. Then I felt it. The presence, not just around me, but in me. The same sensation I had felt in the lower morgue. That weight, that cold intrusion. I knew without seeing it that it was there, waiting, watching, pressing against the edges of my mind. I could hear the soft drip of water somewhere, like a pulse, like a signal. I shivered violently. I forced myself to stand. I had to see her. I had to confirm that she was really alive. My legs were stiff, trembling, but I moved toward the nurse's station. The hallway stretched unnaturally, the lights flickering, shadows crawling along the walls. Every step felt like walking through molasses, every breath like inhaling shards of ice. And there she was, exactly where I had seen her before, laughing softly, talking to someone. Warm, human, ordinary, and yet I couldn't shake the certainty that she was not what she seemed. I stopped a few feet away, my eyes locked on her face. My hands shook, my mind raced. Could she even see me? Could she know that I had discovered the tag? I wanted to speak, to demand answers, but the words stuck in my throat. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure she could hear it. And then, for a brief second, our eyes met. I saw nothing, nothing human. Her gaze was empty, glassy, and cold. It pierced me in a way that made my bones ache. I stumbled backward, my flashlight clattering to the floor. The beam wavered across the walls, catching on drawers, tables, and then her again. She was still there, still laughing softly, still moving like nothing was wrong, but her presence pressed against my mind. Not malevolent? Not yet. But alien. Wrong. I wanted to flee. I wanted to leave the morgue forever, but my body betrayed me. I was rooted to the spot, trembling, sweat and fear mingling in a cold film across my skin. My ears rang with the distant sound of dripping water, the same as downstairs, a rhythm I couldn't escape. And in that rhythm, I understood something terrible. The tag was not a mistake. The gurney was not an accident. The man on Highway 37 was not gone. Everything was connected. I forced myself to look down at the tag again, lying on the table. It felt heavier now, oppressive, like a weight pressing directly into my chest. I picked it up once more, feeling the cold metal of the drawer beneath my fingers, feeling the damp chill creeping through the floorboards. The letters stared at me, sharp and precise, yet impossibly wrong. She is alive. She is dead. I didn't know which was true. And that, I realized with a shudder that ran from my scalp to my toes, was the point. I didn't know anything anymore. Nothing could be trusted. Not the water, not the shadows, not the people I saw, not even myself. I sank to the floor, back against the drawer, gripping the tag like a lifeline. The lights flickered once, twice, and in the brief darkness between, I could feel the presence around me, pressing, waiting. I had no answers, only fear, only certainty that what I had seen, what I had touched, what I had felt, was not finished with me. The nurse upstairs moved past, laughing softly, unaware, ordinary in appearance. But the tag in my hand said otherwise, and somewhere deep in the shadows of the morgue, I knew that the truth was waiting for me to discover it. If I survived long enough to see it, the water had receded just enough that I could move without wading through knee-deep puddles, but the morgue was still soaked, the air thick with damp concrete and decay. Every step I took echoed softly, mingling with the distant drip of water somewhere in the pipes. My body still ached from the cold, the fear, and the hours I had spent crouched in the lower levels, staring at the floating gurney and that impossible tag. I tried to tell myself I was imagining things, that the storm, the darkness, the isolation were playing tricks on my mind. But deep down I knew better. I had felt it. It had been there watching me, following me, and now, in the quiet aftermath of the storm, I could sense it moving again. I walked toward the security office at the end of the hall, flashlight in hand, heart thudding unevenly. The floor was slick, the water leaving streaks on the tile that glistened under the weak overhead lights. That's when I noticed them, bare footprints in the thin layer of water covering the floor. At first I thought they might be my own, reflections or echoes of my earlier steps, but they were too deliberate, too precise. The footprints were small, almost delicate, wet and bare, trailing from the hallway into the security office. I followed them cautiously, feeling the cold seep into my socks through my shoes. Each step I took toward them made my stomach twist tighter. I knew the rules of the world no longer applied here. Nothing made sense anymore, and yet my mind insisted on understanding. I reached the doorway of the office. The footprints ended abruptly, just stopped, my chest constricted. I shone my flashlight across the floor. The water reflected the light in jagged, trembling patterns. And then I realized they had stopped right behind me. I spun slowly, my flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. Nothing. Only the chair, empty. The computer screens flickering weakly with the security feed. My pulse slammed against my ribs. I could feel my hands shaking, though I gripped the flashlight tightly, hoping the cold steel would keep me grounded. I told myself to breathe. Just breathe. Rational thought. Logical steps. Check the office, check the cameras, figure out what this was. My voice caught in my throat. My hands fumbled with the chair, trying to rotate it, trying to see if something had left a clue. The water pooled around its base, distorted reflections rippling in the weak light. The security monitors showed nothing unusual. Empty hallways, flickering shadows from the storm. Nothing that could explain the footprints. And yet I had seen them. And yet they had ended behind my chair, impossibly close. I sank into the chair slowly, trying to keep my mind from spiraling. I traced the water-streaked floor with my eyes, counting the steps in my head. Each wet print a heartbeat, a pulse, a signal I couldn't ignore. My fingers drummed nervously against the desk. I could feel the weight of something behind me, though every glance over my shoulder revealed only emptiness. The silence was oppressive. Not a breeze, not a distant voice, just the low hum of the monitors and the occasional drip from a leaky pipe. My ears strained. My pulse felt loud enough to wake the dead. I thought about the gurney, the tag, the man on Highway 37. All of it converged in that room, all of it pressing against me in this small, wet space. I tried to rationalize again. Could someone have broken in during the storm? Could it have been a prank? No. The footprints were bare, impossibly clean for someone who would have had to wade through the flooded lower morgue. And the way they ended? Right behind my chair. No one could have done that without me noticing. I leaned back slowly, chair creaking under my weight, and stared at the monitors. My reflection in one of them caught my eye. I saw my pale face, wide-eyed, sweat beading at my temples, and I shivered. But there was something else in the reflection. A shadow behind me, fleeting, just beyond the edge of the screen. I turned sharply. Nothing. Only the empty office, only the chair, only the water-streaked floor. I sank lower into the chair, gripping the edge of the desk. I could feel the cold air from the vents pressing against my neck, a subtle brush like fingers. My stomach turned. My mind raced with memories I wished I could forget. The gurney floating in the water, the shadow beneath it, the groan that pressed into my skull, the tag, the impossible nurse, and now the footprints, ending behind me as if whatever had made them had circled the room, studying me. I tried to focus on the monitors again. The cameras covered every hallway, every corner of the morgue. Nothing moved. Nothing alive or dead passed the lenses. And yet I knew the footprints hadn't lied. I had seen them. I had followed them, and I knew, with a certainty that made my teeth ache, that whatever had left them was still here. I leaned forward, heart hammering, and reached for the nearest drawer. The one filled with old keys, spare security badges, small tools. I needed something, anything, to defend myself, or at least to feel like I had control. My fingers closed around a small flashlight. The beam was weak, flickering, but it was something. I held it out before me, trembling, as I scanned the office. Every shadow, every dark corner, the footprints. I kept thinking about them, how they had stopped behind my chair, how precise they were, how deliberate. The thought made my stomach twist again. Whoever or whatever had left them had known I would sit here, had known I would notice, had known how to terrify me without even touching me. I sank back in the chair, exhausted, and tried to calm myself. I tried to tell myself that I was losing it, that the storm had finally broken me, that the water, the gurney, the tag, the footprints, it was all a series of coincidences, hallucinations. But the fear in my chest, the prickling at the base of my neck, the way the air seemed heavier here than anywhere else in the building, none of it was coincidence. A sound reached me, soft at first, like water dripping, then slightly louder, a soft shuffle. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. The monitors continued to hum, showing nothing. The footprints behind my chair were dry now, no longer shiny with water, yet I could feel the presence they had left lingering, pressing into the room like a cold wave. I didn't move. I couldn't. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to run, to flee, but I was trapped by my own fear, anchored by the knowledge that whatever had left the prince was here, still just out of sight. The chair creaked slightly beneath me. I held my breath, muscles taut. Another shuffle, softer, closer. And then, silence. I told myself it had been nothing. The building settling. My imagination. And yet, when I turned slowly to glance at the floor behind me, I could swear I saw something. Just a ripple in the reflection on the wet tiles. A shadow, perhaps, or nothing at all. My stomach lurched either way. Hours passed, or maybe minutes, I couldn't tell. The lights flickered on and off, each time throwing the office into brief darkness, each time making the shadows stretch longer, deeper, hungrier. I kept my eyes fixed on the empty space behind my chair, every nerve screaming that the footprints, the presence, the thing I could not name, was still there. I thought about calling someone, anyone. But the storm had knocked out most of the lines, and the security system itself seemed off, delayed, flickering, sometimes showing the same hallway twice, sometimes skipping a feed entirely. And every time I glanced at the monitors, I felt the weight of being watched, the undeniable certainty that I wasn't alone in the office. My hands shook. I gripped the flashlight tighter. The reflection in the monitor caught my eye again. This time it was different. The shadow behind me? Closer, darker, impossibly still. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I just stared, heart hammering, eyes wide. And then, a cold brush at the back of my neck. Not wind, not air. Something solid, pressing gently, deliberately. I spun, but nothing was there. Only the wet tiles. Only the empty office. Only the chair that had held me all this time. And yet I could feel it. The presence, watching, waiting, patient. I sank back into the chair, gripping the armrests. My chest heaved. My eyes darted around the office, the monitors, the floor, the shadows, the footprints, the gurney, the tag, the man on Highway 37. Everything was connected. Everything was here. And I knew in the deepest part of me that it would not stop. Not until it had me too. I was driving home that night, the rain so thick it made the world outside my windshield look like one long gray smear. The kind of rain that doesn't just fall. It presses down on you, makes everything slower, heavier. I'd been on Route 19 for almost an hour, the road curving through the woods, the headlights cutting through fog like two pale knives. The bends always made me nervous, but tonight, something felt sharper, taut. Like the road itself was holding its breath. I'd just passed the old bridge, the one where the creek runs fast and brown in the spring, and I noticed it. Something white. At first, I thought it was a plastic bag, one of those heavy ones that clings to the underbrush. whipped along by the wind and rain. I slowed the car, the tires hissing on wet asphalt. My eyes fixed on it, squinting through the windshield wipers that were moving too slowly, stuttering in the downpour. It wasn't a bag. Not exactly. My stomach clenched when I saw the round, empty curve of it, buried halfway in the mud at the edge of the shoulder. A human skull. I hit the brakes so hard my chest bumped the steering wheel. I wanted to look away, to drive on, to tell myself it was just some prank, a Halloween prop tossed into the woods for some idiot's thrill. But something, I can't name it, pulled me toward it, a sharp, cold curiosity. I stepped out of the car, the rain soaking through my jacket in seconds, and my boots sank into the soft, wet earth. The wind carried the smell of the creek, sharp and sour, mixed with the cold iron of wet soil. I crouched down. The skull was small, bleached white from the rain, half covered in mud and leaves. One eye socket stared blindly at the world, empty, accusing, almost watching. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might tear itself from my chest. I'd seen dead things before, but never like this. Never so quiet, so patient. I touched it with a gloved hand. Cold, brittle. I imagined the head it had belonged to, hair slicked with rain, skin pale, eyes wide with terror or maybe surprise. My stomach turned. The rain ran down my neck and I could feel it dripping into my collar, mixing with the sticky, earthy smell of the mud. I backed up a step. My hands were shaking. I shouldn't be here. I should get back into the car and drive away like any rational person would. But my feet didn't move. I kept staring. And then I noticed the shoulder itself. It was washed out. The rain had eaten into the soil, carved a small trench, leaving the skull precariously perched like some grotesque warning. I thought about calling the police, but the thought of waiting in that empty, rain-soaked woods made my skin crawl. What if it was fresh? What if someone was nearby watching me? I looked over my shoulder and there was nothing. Just the endless stretch of wet road, trees bending in the wind, branches scraping each other like dry bones. I knelt closer, trying to make sense of it. There were fragments scattered around, small bits of what must have been jaw or cheekbone hidden under the mud. The skull itself had a crack along the left temple, jagged, almost surgical in its precision. My mind refused to process it fully. How old was this? How long had it been lying here, hidden under the dirt, waiting for the rain to uncover it? I wanted to leave, to tell myself it was none of my business, but I couldn't. I couldn't stop staring. There was a story here, something desperate, and I had this horrible magnetic feeling that it wanted me to see it. The rain picked up, slamming against my hood, my hair plastered to my face. I squinted into the darkness beyond the shoulder, thinking I saw movement. A shadow, maybe, shifting between the trees. My breath caught. I told myself it was nothing. Just the wind. Just the rain. But my gut twisted, cold, and I couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was watching me. I forced myself to stand, shaking off mud, and looked down at the skull one last time. And then I saw it, a flash of metal, a ring, half buried in the mud, wedged between the soil and the edge of the trench. Gold, tarnished, but gold. I picked it up, my gloves slick with rain and dirt, and slipped it into my pocket. It felt heavy, not in weight, but in significance, like carrying a secret that wasn't mine. I climbed back into the car, my hands still trembling, and started the engine. The headlights cut through the dark, the wipers screeching, and I drove slowly, eyes darting to the shoulder, half expecting the skull to be moving, to tilt its head toward me. Of course it didn't. It just sat there, hollow, patient, waiting. I couldn't stop thinking about it. All the way home, the skull haunted my mind. I pictured it at night, lying in that trench, rain washing over it, unseeing eyes staring at the darkened woods. I thought about who it might have been, how they ended up here. A lone traveler? A hitchhiker? A local? Lost to the river or the road? My imagination raced through every possible scenario, each one darker than the last. When I got home, I washed the mud from my hands, but I couldn't wash the image from my mind. I sat in my kitchen, staring at the gold ring in my pocket, the rain still hammering against the windows. I couldn't call anyone, not yet. Not until I knew more. I didn't want the police here, poking, prying, disturbing what might be something sacred or something cursed. Sleep didn't come that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the skull, empty eye sockets, the crack along its temple, the way it had almost seemed alive under the rain. I tried to tell myself I'd just been tired, just imagining things. But there was a weight to it, a truth that pressed into my chest and wouldn't leave. By morning, the rain had stopped. The clouds broke and sunlight glinted off the wet asphalt. I wanted to forget, to pretend it was just a nightmare, but I knew I couldn't. I drove back to the spot on Route 19, heart thudding in my chest. The trench was washed further, deeper now. The mud had shifted. And the skull, gone. I looked around, panic rising, imagining it rolling toward the woods, toward the creek. Or worse, someone coming back to reclaim it. I crouched down where it had been, fingers brushing the mud. Nothing. Just the cold, wet earth and the debris left behind. A single leaf floated on the mud, clinging stubbornly like a remnant of memory. I drove away, trying not to think, trying not to imagine who it had been, how long it had waited for the rain to reveal it, and what secrets the woods might be keeping. But the image of that skull stayed with me. I kept seeing it in corners of my eyes, behind curtains, in the shadowed bends of Route 19. Always waiting, always patient. Even now, as I sit and write this, I can see it. Half buried in mud, rain dripping from the trees, the washed-out shoulder holding onto its secret. And I know somehow that it's not done with me. That skull, cracked and empty, is patient. And maybe, if I'm not careful, it will find a way to remind me that it was never really gone. The road, the rain, the skull, it all feels alive in a way I can't explain. I keep thinking about the ring I took, heavy in my pocket, and a cold dread spreads through me. It wasn't just a piece of metal. It was a story. Someone's story. And now I'm part of it. I don't know if I should go back. Part of me wants to see it again, to understand. But another part knows that some things once uncovered cannot be left alone. And maybe some things are meant to stay buried. But the rain will come again. It always does. And when it does, the shoulder will soften. The mud will shift and the skull, waiting, patient, might just show itself again. And I'll be there. Because I can't look away. I couldn't stop thinking about the skull. I kept seeing it in the dark corners of my apartment. The empty sockets staring at me through my eyelids when I closed them. Every time the memory surfaced, my chest tightened, the same cold dread from the roadside creeping up my spine. I tried to sleep, tried to convince myself it was just some old bones, maybe decades old, and I was overreacting. But something about that skull, it wasn't just dead, it was waiting, patient. And I couldn't shake the feeling that it had a story I had stumbled into whether I wanted to or not. I tried to put it out of my mind that morning, but the rain had stopped, leaving the woods looking almost peaceful. The sun hit the wet asphalt, making the road shimmer. It was beautiful in that deceptive way that makes danger feel invisible. But I knew better. I couldn't leave it alone. Not after the ring, not after the skull. I went back to Route 19. The shoulder was softer now, the mud shifting under the weight of my boots. The trench where the skull had been was deeper, darker. The rain had reshaped the earth, carved new lines in the soil, and there it was, or rather beneath where it had been. Something glinting faintly in the mud caught my eye. I knelt down again, stomach twisting. It wasn't the skull this time. Something smaller, metallic, sharp against the dull brown of the earth. I brushed away the mud, careful not to miss anything. And then I saw it, a police badge. One of those old-style badges, the kind that fits in your palm, heavy and cold. The engraving was partially obscured by mud, but I could make out the name of the department. The same department that patrolled this area, the same one I grew up knowing. The one my father had once joked about when he'd say, "Don't get on their radar, or you'll be in trouble before you even know it." I froze. My fingers hovered over it, half expecting it to vanish if I touched it. My mind raced. Why was a badge here under the bones? Had this person been a cop? Had they been killed? My heart pounded like a drum I couldn't quiet. The wind rattled the trees, the rain from the previous night dripping in fat droplets from the branches. I felt like the woods themselves were holding their breath, waiting for me to figure it out. I pulled the badge out carefully, wiping the mud with the sleeve of my jacket. It was heavier than I expected, and there was a faint, almost imperceptible curve in it, like it had been bent or twisted at some point. I turned it over, looking for a name, for any clue. And then I saw it. Not a name, not entirely, but initials, scratched faintly into the back. I don't know why, but my chest tightened even more. The letters felt familiar, like a half-forgotten memory you can't place. DR. Somewhere in my mind, it hovered, but I couldn't name it. I shoved it into my pocket, the weight of it pressing down, making every step back toward my car feel like I was carrying a living thing. I got into the car, hands trembling as I started the engine. The road stretched before me, the bends and curves suddenly menacing. The woods pressed close, shadows crawling over the asphalt in strange, impossible shapes. I kept looking at the badge, turning it over in my hand. How did a cop's badge end up under the skull? Was the person still out there? Had they been attacked? Or had they disappeared on their own? The questions churned in my mind, but answers were impossible. I drove slowly, headlights cutting through the shadowed bends, every noise in the trees making my stomach leap. I kept thinking I saw movement, shapes darting just out of reach of the light. I told myself it was just the wind, the rain washing through the leaves. But it didn't make the skin crawling along my arms go away. I remembered stories my father had told me as a kid, about people going missing along Route 19, tourists, drifters, even a few locals who never came home. He said the woods could swallow you whole if you weren't careful, that sometimes the road itself seemed to conspire against you. I had laughed then, but now, kneeling in the mud with a skull and a cop's badge in my hands, I could see exactly what he meant. The road wasn't just asphalt and paint. It had memory. It had teeth. When I got home, I set the badge on my kitchen table, not touching anything else. I didn't want to lose it. Didn't want it to vanish like the skull had. I couldn't explain why I felt that way, but it felt like a lifeline, a piece of a puzzle I wasn't ready to see whole. I stared at it for hours, tracing the initials with my finger, turning it over, trying to remember why DR felt so familiar. The days blurred after that. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the trench, the skull, the badge half buried in mud. I tried to tell myself I was just tired, that my brain was filling in gaps with fear. But it wasn't just imagination. There was something about the badge, something about those initials that felt like a warning, or maybe a calling. I began walking the woods near Route 19 during the day, pretending I was just out for exercise. But the trees watched me. The wind whispered, and every step I took seemed to echo with the past. I kept thinking about who DR had been. A cop? Or someone pretending to be one? Had they been protecting something? Or had they been the target? My imagination spun scenarios too dark to fully allow myself to believe, yet too vivid to ignore. One afternoon, I went back to the shoulder, hoping to see if the rain had shifted anything. The mud was softer, wetter, and I nearly sank knee-deep in one spot. The trench was deeper, as if the earth itself wanted to hide what lay beneath. I scanned the area, heart hammering, expecting to see more bones, maybe even the skull itself returned in some impossible way. But there was nothing. Just mud and debris, leaves slick with water. I dug a little, careful, cautious. Just shallow at first. And then I hit something hard. Not bone, metal, cold, solid. I brushed away the mud with my hands. Another badge? No, something else. A wallet, cracked leather, sodden, heavy. I opened it slowly, hesitating. The smell of wet leather mixing with mud and decay. Inside were papers, mostly destroyed by rain, but some fragments remain. A driver's license, a photograph. A name near it was him, the person whose badge I had found. The photograph was faded, but the eyes, they seemed alive, staring at me from across time, alive and accusing. I felt a cold sweat run down my back. I couldn't breathe for a moment, frozen, staring at a face that had been dead, waiting under the mud, hidden by the road and the rain. I put the wallet down, stepping back. I couldn't take it all in at once. My mind raced. How long had he been here? Weeks? Months? Years? The rain had unearthed him, brought his remains back into the world, demanded that I see them. And I had. I had stared. I had touched. Driving home that night, the badge in my pocket, the photograph tucked carefully beside it, I realized something. Whoever DR had been, whatever had happened along Route 19, it wasn't over. The road had a memory, and it had marked me as part of it. The skull, the badge, the wallet, it was all part of the same story. A story I hadn't asked to know but now couldn't ignore. I began to notice things in the woods, in the shadows near the road. Things that shouldn't have been there. A flicker of movement, a shape that didn't belong, a sound too deliberate for the wind. And each time I saw it, I felt the weight of the badge heavy in my pocket, reminding me that someone had died here, that someone had been watched, hunted, and that maybe, just maybe, I was next. I don't know how I'll face Route 19 again. Every time I drive past that bend, my eyes go to the shoulder, half expecting to see the skull returned, or another piece of someone's life torn open by the rain and the road. But I also can't stop myself. The story isn't done, and I am a part of it now. The bones, the badge, the mud, they call to me, whispering from beneath the surface, patient and relentless. And so I keep the badge with me, tucked away in my apartment, a reminder of what I've seen and what I've found. I don't know what DR was running from, or what killed him, or why the road had claimed him. But I know that the woods remember, the road remembers, and I somehow remember too. Sometimes late at night I think I hear footsteps outside, soft on the asphalt, moving in rhythm with my own heartbeat. I tell myself it's nothing. But then I feel the weight of the badge in my pocket, and I know the truth. The road has a memory, and it hasn't finished telling me its story. I don't know if I want it to. I couldn't stop thinking about DR. The photograph, the badge, the wallet, it all felt alive, as if the road itself had pressed it into my hands, demanding I see it. But I knew it wasn't just about him. Something about the way the badge had felt, heavy in my pocket, told me the story wasn't finished. That it wasn't just someone else's horror I had stumbled into. No. Somehow it was mine too. I spent the next day at home, trying to make sense of it. I stared at the badge on my desk, running my fingers over the initials DR, turning it over and over, tracing the scratches in the metal. The photograph stayed beside it, the eyes in it accusing me in ways I didn't understand. I felt a cold weight in my chest every time I looked at it, the same tightness I had felt when I first unearthed it from the mud. I couldn't eat, couldn't focus. The skull and the badge haunted me like a pair of ghosts I couldn't see. Finally, I decided I had to call someone. I had to know if DR had actually gone missing, if someone was looking for him, if the badge meant anything at all. I picked up my phone and dialed the local police department. My hands were shaking. I could feel the badge in my pocket, cold against my skin, pressing into my palm. "Dispatch!" a woman's voice answered. Calm, neutral, routine. I cleared my throat, trying to keep it steady. I found something. A badge, a wallet, bones, somewhere along Route 19. There was a pause on the line. "Sir, I'm going to need you to clarify." "I know it sounds crazy," I said, my voice rising despite my attempts to stay calm. "But the badge, the initials are DR. Is there a missing officer with those initials?" There was a long pause. Then the voice came back, clipped, careful. "We don't have any missing officers. No one with those initials has been reported missing. Are you sure you have the right department?" I felt my stomach twist. "Yes, I'm sure. It's the badge from this department. I found it with remains, bones, someone's dead." Another pause, longer this time. The line was quiet except for the low hum of the phone. "Sir, I don't know what to tell you. We have no missing officers. If you have evidence, please bring it in. We'll take a look." I hung up, my hands trembling. No missing officer. That shouldn't have been possible. I knew what I had seen. I had touched it. I had held it. The badge had felt real, heavy, real enough to press into my chest, real enough to make my stomach twist, and then it hit me, slowly, terrifyingly. I dug into the pocket of my jacket, pulled out the badge again and stared at it. The engraving, the number, the badge number. My badge number. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. I turned it over again and again, almost convinced I was imagining it. But the numbers were the same. Mine. How could it be mine? I still had it in my wallet at home. I had checked it just last week. My badge number. On the bones. My hands went cold. I dropped the badge onto the table and stepped back. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. The room seemed to tilt around me, the air thick, heavy, as if it were pressing against my chest. My own badge, my own number, my own life, somehow marked in mud and bones along Route 19. I kept staring at it, trying to make sense of it, trying to convince myself it was a trick. A misprint, some cruel coincidence, but no. Deep in my chest, something dark and hollow told me otherwise. I was tied to this. Somehow, in a way I couldn't name, I was tied to the skull, to DR, to whatever had happened along that road. I tried calling dispatch again, thinking maybe I had misheard. Maybe they would clarify, confirm the mistake, but the same response came. No missing officers, nothing. They sounded almost too calm, like they knew nothing, or like they weren't allowed to tell me. My mind raced. How could this be happening? I kept thinking back to the trench in the mud, to the skull, to the wallet, to the photograph. Every piece had felt deliberate, as if someone or something had arranged it for me to find. And now my badge number, etched in cold metal on a pile of bones. The thought made my skin crawl. I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't pretend it wasn't real. I went back to the road that night, driving slowly, headlights cutting through darkness. The bends seemed sharper, the shadows longer, as if the woods themselves were leaning in to watch me. I didn't stop at first. I couldn't. I was terrified of what I might find. But my mind wouldn't let me stay away. Not after the badge, not after the numbers. Finally, I pulled over, my car shivering on the slick asphalt. The wind rattled the windows. The trees leaned over the road like dark, twisted hands. I stepped out, the air cold, thick with the smell of wet earth and decay. The shoulder was there, washed and soft, waiting. The trench, deeper now, almost inviting. I walked closer, each step heavy, deliberate, my stomach twisting in knots. The mud squelched beneath my boots, cold and sucking at my feet. And then I saw it. Not the skull this time. Not yet, but fragments. Bits of bone, broken, scattered. And in the center, half buried, glinting in the moonlight, the metal of the badge. My badge, my number. Staring up at me, impossible, undeniable. I sank to my knees, my fingers shaking as I touched it. Cold, solid, heavy, mine? I couldn't explain it. I couldn't understand it. And then I saw the crack in the mud, the trench itself, and I realized the bones around it were my own, or at least a version of me. Some future or past or mirror reality where I had ended up here, forgotten by the world, uncovered by rain. My breath came in ragged gasps. I wanted to scream, but no sound came. I wanted to run, but my feet were glued to the earth, as if the road itself was holding me. And I thought about DR, about the photograph, about the wallet and the skull. Someone had left this for me to find. Or maybe the road had remembered me before I ever knew I belonged here. I pulled back, my eyes scanning the shoulder, the woods beyond. The wind whispered through the trees, or maybe it was my own fear, making the leaves tremble. My heart pounded and I realized something I couldn't deny. Whatever had happened here, whatever had been unearthed, it wasn't random. I wasn't random. I drove home, the badge clutched in my hands, staring at it the entire way. Every turn of the wheel, every shadow in the trees, every bend in the road felt like a warning. Not for someone else, for me, for who I was or who I was becoming. I couldn't shake the image of the bones, the skull, the trench. It was burned into my mind. And now, with my badge number etched among them, it was personal. I sat in my apartment trying to calm down, trying to tell myself I was imagining it. But the photograph, the wallet, the badge, they all said otherwise. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. The wind outside rattled the windows, and I imagined footsteps on the asphalt, soft, deliberate, following me even here. The road had a memory, and now it had my number. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't eat. I sat in the dark, staring at the badge, turning it over, tracing the numbers. Each time I looked, the unease deepened. The road was waiting. The bones were waiting. DR had been waiting. And now I was waiting too. Waiting for what? I didn't know. But I knew it would come. The recognition, the understanding, the reckoning. In the days that followed, I avoided the road during daylight, but Route 19 haunted my every thought. The bends, the shoulder, the washed-out trench, they lived in my mind. Sometimes I imagined the skull appearing in my apartment, the empty sockets staring through walls, through my chest. I could feel the weight of the badge in my pocket, even when it was on the table. It was alive, It carried memory, and it carried warning. I tried to tell myself it was coincidence, that the road had unearthed a badge with my number by chance, that my mind was connecting dots that weren't meant to be connected. But the truth pressed in, heavy and undeniable. The bones, the badge, the skull, they were meant for me. The road had remembered me, and it wasn't done. Sometimes I catch myself looking in the mirror, wondering if my reflection is really mine, if the eyes staring back are the same ones that will end up in the mud, in the trench, under the rain. I tell myself it's paranoia. But I can't stop. I can't escape it. The road remembers, and it knows me. I don't know how long I can go on like this, how long I can live with the knowledge that somewhere, somehow, my number, my identity, is etched into bones under a washed-out shoulder on Route 19. I don't know what will happen when the rain comes again, when the road calls me back. But I do know this. I am tied to it now, and it won't let me go. The asylum smelled like wet stone and rot. Even before I stepped inside, the wind carried it to me, riding on the rain that had been hammering the roof all night. My boots squelched on the cracked concrete of the entrance, and I could feel the chill climbing up my legs, the kind of cold that seeps in and doesn't leave. I told myself it was just water, just the remnants of a storm, but something about this place has always felt alive, watching, waiting. I flicked on my flashlight and stepped into the main hall. The beam cut through darkness thick as velvet, picking out peeling paint, rusted pipes, and broken tiles that clung stubbornly to the floor like dead skin. I could hear the rain tapping above, a slow drumbeat that echoed through the halls, bouncing off every surface, filling the empty space with sound and shadow. I ran my hand along the railing of the stairs as I moved, the metal cold and sticky with rust. Each step I took echoed, bouncing back to me in irregular, unsettling rhythms. I'd walked these halls dozens of times, done the same rounds over and over, but tonight it felt different, heavy, like the walls themselves were pressing in, leaning closer, listening. Water dripped from the ceiling onto the floor, tiny splashes at first, then a steady rhythm. I stopped for a moment, listening. Each drop seemed deliberate, landing just so, marking time like some ancient clock counting down. I turned my flashlight toward the ceiling and saw a thin rivulet of water tracing the crack in the plaster. I imagined it as a vein, pulsing, bleeding into the corridor. My stomach twisted. The hallways were quiet otherwise. Too quiet. I could hear the faint creak of the building settling. The occasional scuttle of a rat, maybe, but no voices, no doors banging shut like they used to. The patients were gone. Staff long gone. Only me and the building, and the ghosts of what had happened here. I rounded a corner and my light caught on a room I'd passed 100 times. The door hung crooked, its hinges screaming when I pushed it. Inside, the smell was stronger, something sour, metallic, almost like iron. Rainwater pooled along the floor, reflecting the ceiling like a black mirror. I could see the remnants of furniture twisted and broken. Chairs tipped over, a table split in two, the walls scratched and scarred. Shadows pooled in the corners, waiting for me to notice them, and I did. I noticed everything. I walked slowly, methodically, checking each room as I always did. This was my first round tonight, the start of a night that would stretch long and thin like wet paper. I checked the doors, the windows, the broken locks. I tapped my flashlight against the walls, listening for hollows, for signs of weakness, of movement. And I felt it again, that weight in the air, something that didn't belong. There was a room at the end of the hall, half submerged in water from a leak in the roof. I crouched and ran my fingers through it. Cold, sticky. Not just water, something else mixed in. My stomach flipped, and I thought of the stories I'd heard from staff years ago. Patients disappearing in the night, staff finding things they shouldn't, whispers in the halls. I told myself it was just old buildings, water, and mold, but my gut told me otherwise. The echoes were getting worse. Every step I took bounced back at me in strange ways, overlapping, lagging, like the building itself was learning to mimic me. I paused, listening. There was a rhythm, a pattern almost, and I felt my chest tighten. My own heartbeat seemed loud in the dark, matching the echo of the water dripping. I realized I was holding my breath, and when I exhaled, The sound seemed to scatter across the hall, louder than it should be. I kept moving, checking each room, each corridor. The further I went, the more the building felt alive. The walls pulsed, subtly, as if breathing. The floorboards shifted under my feet in ways they shouldn't. The air smelled damp and metallic, mixing with something else, something sweeter, almost like decay and flowers at the same time. It made my stomach turn. In one of the smaller rooms, I noticed marks on the wall, scratches in no real pattern, but deliberate. The kind of marks someone makes when they've been trapped, when they want to leave a message, even if no one will see it. I pressed my hand to them, feeling the roughness under my fingers, imagining the hands that had done this, the nails, the fear, the desperation. A shiver ran down my spine. I moved on, down the hall toward the central stairwell. The water dripped harder here, forming little rivulets that carried small debris like leaves and bits of plaster. I felt a chill settle deep into my bones. The building groaned above me, a low, deliberate sound that didn't match the wind or the storm. It felt almost like a voice, a sigh, something waiting. I reached the stairwell, the light catching on the railing. Rust and decay everywhere, the paint peeling like old skin. I leaned over the banister, looking down into the darkness below. Shadows pooled in the corners of the stairwell, black and waiting. My flashlight caught on something at the bottom, a glint of metal, maybe, or a reflection. I couldn't tell. My stomach tightened. I felt the weight in my chest, the same that had pressed down in other parts of the building. Heavy, insistent, watching. I took the stairs slowly, one step at a time, my boots splashing in the rainwater that had made its way inside. The echoes of each step followed me down, multiplying, overlapping, until I wasn't sure which sounds were mine and which weren't. My hand rested on the railing, cold and slick, and I felt the vibrations through the metal as if the building itself was alive beneath my fingers. At the bottom, the hall stretched out into darkness. Water pooled along the tiles, reflecting the broken lights overhead. I kept moving, flashlight sweeping the shadows. The smell was worse here, stronger, like something dead, like iron and rot and wet stone combined. My mind tried to tell me it was just water seeping through old pipes, just mold, just a decaying building. But my gut knew better. Something was here. Something waiting. I passed a room with bars across the windows, a former patient's room. I could see scratches on the walls, a small pool of water on the floor. I imagined the people who had been trapped here, the fear, the isolation. My chest ached as I thought of it. The building had seen so much, held so much, and now it remembered me. Or maybe I was remembering it. I continued my rounds, moving methodically, checking doors, windows, rooms. The rain above kept falling, dripping through cracks, forming puddles that reflected my flashlight like fractured mirrors. I imagined shapes moving in those reflections, shadows flicking just out of sight. My mind raced with possibilities. I tried to tell myself it was just my imagination, just echoes and water. But the fear stayed, deep, solid, like the building had claimed a piece of me. At one point, I stopped in the main corridor, listening. There it was again, a sound I couldn't place. A shuffle, faint, deliberate, echoing off the walls. Not a rat, not the wind. Something else. Something patient. My heart raced and I felt my chest tighten. I told myself to calm down, but the sound followed me as I moved, just at the edge of hearing. I rounded a corner and the light caught on a puddle that had formed beneath a broken window. I looked down and for a second I thought I saw a reflection. Not mine, something else. Pale, distorted, shifting. I blinked. It was gone. Just water. Just reflection. But the image stayed in my mind, haunting, impossible to shake. I continued my rounds, the building growing heavier with each step. The echoes, the water, the smell, all pressing down, claiming space in my mind. I realized I was sweating, not from heat, but from fear, from the pressure of the asylum itself. The darkness wasn't just absence of light. It was something alive, something patient. Like the walls themselves had memories and they were showing them to me. By the time I finished my first rounds, the building felt different, heavier, watching. I had seen nothing overt, nothing that could be named as a threat, but the air itself was thick with presence. The echoes of rainwater, The groan of the walls, the shadows in the corners, they were all part of it, part of something that remembered, something that waited. I sat on the stairs for a moment, letting the flashlight rest on my knees. My chest ached, my mind raced. I tried to think rationally. It's just an old building. Water, echoes, broken plaster. Nothing more. But the fear didn't leave. It pressed down, patient and unyielding, like the asylum itself was aware of me, had always been aware of me. I knew the first rounds were just the beginning. The building had more to show, more to whisper, and I wasn't sure I wanted to see it all, but I had to. Every drip, every shadow, every echo was a story waiting to be told, and I was the only one left to listen. The rain outside eased, leaving the world wet and gleaming, but inside, the asylum remained alive, waiting, watching, patient, and I knew I would return, because the building remembered me now, and it would not let me go. I shouldn't have gone back. I knew that as soon as I crossed the threshold of the asylum again, but something inside me demanded it. That first night, the echoes, the rain, the shadows, they had left a mark. And now I felt like I had to see more. I had to know what the building remembered and whether it remembered me. I moved slowly through the main hall, my boots squelching in the pooled water left by last night's storm. The walls were familiar, peeling paint and rusted pipes, broken tiles scattered like teeth on the floor. I passed the rooms I'd checked before, their shadows deeper, their silence heavier. The air smelled of wet stone and decay, but now there was something else, faint, almost sweet, mixed with the damp. It made my stomach turn. I reached the administrative wing, a place I had avoided on my first rounds. Filing cabinets lined the walls, some toppled, drawers hanging open, their contents spilling into the hall. I ran my hand over the drawers as I passed, half expecting them to whisper, half expecting them to move on their own. I remembered the stories from staff long gone, files disappearing overnight, patient records found in the most impossible places. I swallowed hard. One drawer caught my attention. The metal was warped, rusted, but it opened when I tugged, revealing a stack of files. The top one was labeled neatly, handwritten, Patient 37. I felt a chill run down my spine before I even touched it. The number alone made my hands tremble. I pulled the file out and flicked it open. The first page was filled with notes, medical handwriting that twisted and turned across the page. The patient's name was blacked out, but the details beneath it weren't hidden. Birth date, family history, medical records, psychological evaluations. And then I froze. The details weren't just familiar, they were mine. Every line, every date, every minor note about a childhood illness, the way I responded to stress, even the exact reason I had taken this post, this current job, my current location. Everything in the file matched my life as precisely as if someone had been following me, documenting me. I sat down heavily, the file trembling in my hands. My heart raced. My mind refused to process it. It couldn't be possible. It was just a coincidence, I told myself. Someone else with the same history, the same name, the same job. It had to be. But deep in my chest, something dark and cold told me otherwise. This was deliberate. Someone or something had known me before I knew myself. I flipped through the pages, the handwriting looping and precise, filled with observations I could barely believe. Notes on behavior, reactions to stress, coping mechanisms, even fears I hadn't shared with anyone. It was like reading a diary I didn't know existed. One written by someone else, but somehow speaking to the deepest parts of me. And then there it was, a note in the margin. Small, almost hidden, scrawled in a hurried hand. The patient must not leave. The record must be kept current. I felt a cold sweat break across my forehead. The word patient, me, must not leave. And why keep it current unless someone had been watching, keeping track? The sentence pressed down on me like a weight. I couldn't shake the feeling that this building, these files, had been waiting for me. I leaned back, the chair creaking beneath me, and tried to breathe. My mind raced through memories of my childhood, my life, every choice I'd ever made. Were they all here, written down somewhere? Was this asylum a mirror or a trap? The idea made my stomach twist, my hands cold and clammy. I kept turning the pages. There were sketches, diagrams, little notes on behavior, on interactions with others. Every detail lined up with my memories, even the ones I had buried deep. Every fear, every failure, every embarrassment. I could feel the building around me pressing closer, listening, waiting. The shadows in the corners seemed to thicken, moving slightly as if they were leaning in to read with me. The further I went, the more unnerved I became. There were mentions of sessions I had never attended, therapies I had never undergone, incidents I could not remember, and yet, reading them, I felt the sting of truth, a familiarity that made my skin crawl. I wasn't sure if the notes were prophetic or retrospective, but the weight of them pressed on me like a living thing. A page in the middle caught my eye. It described a current assignment, a post in a facility similar to mine, even naming the town and streets where I lived and worked now. My hands shook. Every word lined up perfectly with my life. The file had followed me, or perhaps I had always been part of it. The line between observer and observed blurred, and I realized with a cold, creeping terror that this file wasn't historical. It was alive, updating, tracking me even now. I flipped to the last pages, notes that were fresher, almost frantic. The handwriting had changed, less careful, more urgent. Monitor closely. Do not allow the patient to leave. The records must remain current. Any deviation must be documented. My hands tightened on the folder. The word patient echoed in my mind. Me, I wasn't a visitor here. I was a patient. The walls, the echoes, the dripping water, they hadn't just been memories. They had been warnings, reminders, keeping me tethered. I slammed the file shut, the sound echoing down the hall, louder than it should have. My chest was tight, my stomach twisting. I wanted to run, to throw the file away, to forget I had seen it. But I couldn't. Something about it, about the words and the diagrams and the notes, held me in place, rooting me to the chair and the building itself. I tried to recall the stories of the asylum's history, the patients who had been lost here, the disappearances, the rumors, and now suddenly I understood. I wasn't just walking the halls for my rounds. I was walking halls that had always known me, that had anticipated me, that had recorded me long before I even knew the place existed. I heard a faint sound then, a dripping from somewhere farther down the hall, water bouncing off the floors. My breath caught. I could feel it echoing, just slightly out of rhythm, like the building was breathing along with me. The shadows in the corners moved again, subtle, almost imperceptible. I could swear something shifted behind a door at the end of the hall, something waiting, something patient. I had to leave, but leaving didn't feel possible. My legs felt like lead. My hands were stuck to the file as if letting go meant losing the truth, losing a thread of reality. And yet staying felt like surrender, like stepping further into a trap I couldn't escape. I finally stood, gripping the file tightly. The building seemed to respond, the air thickening, the shadows deepening. The walls groaned above me, a low, deliberate sound. I forced myself to walk, each step measured, my flashlight cutting swaths through darkness. Every corner I passed felt alive. Every door and window seemed to watch. I reached the main hall, the first hall I had entered that night. The air here felt heavier, almost solid, pressing against me. I glanced at the file one last time. The handwriting seemed to move on the pages, the notes reshaping themselves in my mind, updating, shifting, keeping pace with me. I shivered. The building remembered me, knew me, had been waiting. I left the asylum that night with the file in my bag. I couldn't stop thinking about it on the drive home, about the way it described me in every detail, about the current post that mirrored my own life. Every word was a weight pressing into my chest, a reminder that somewhere, somehow I had been cataloged, observed, written down long before I realized it. At home, I set the file on the table and sat staring at it for hours. I couldn't open it again. I didn't want to, and yet I felt I had to, like the building itself was inside my mind, whispering, urging me to read, to understand, to remember. The shadows in my apartment seemed darker than they should, the air heavier, almost damp. I could hear the faintest echo of dripping water, a rhythm, a pulse, like the asylum had followed me. I kept thinking about the patients whose files I'd read about, the ones whose lives had been marked, recorded, constrained by this place. And now I realized I was one of them. I had never been a visitor, never been an outsider. My life, my memories, my fears, they were already here, written down, cataloged, waiting for me to see them. Sleep was impossible. I kept seeing the halls, the dripping ceilings, the shadows moving just beyond the light of my flashlight. The weight of the file pressed on me even when it was closed. I could feel the words crawling in my mind, rewriting themselves in subtle ways, reminding me of what had been done and what was still to come. I realized I wasn't just reading the files. I was part of them. My life had always been part of the asylum's memory. And now that I had found the evidence, now that I had seen it written in black and white, the building's hold on me was complete. I don't know how long I can ignore it, how long I can pretend it isn't true. The file sits beside me now, the handwriting and the details etched into my memory as surely as if they had been carved into my skin. I can't leave it. I can't destroy it. And I know somehow that the asylum isn't finished with me. It remembers. It always remembers. And now so do I. The air in the asylum felt heavier that night, thick like wet wool pressed against my skin. I walked slowly through the hallways, the flashlight beam cutting jagged lines through darkness, bouncing off the cracked walls. Each step made the floorboards groan beneath me, and I swore the echoes weren't mine alone. There was something following me, something patient, something that had been waiting for this night. I reached the main hall, where the old PA system hung high above the cracked tiles, wires dangling like veins from the ceiling. I had heard it in the stories, the way the system used to carry announcements, alarms, voices long after the asylum closed. I had never thought it would be active, but the second I stepped in, the air shifted and the silence broke. Static. A low, wet hum, like electricity through water. My stomach twisted. I froze. The sound grew louder, coalescing into words. Words I knew. Words that were mine. My name. My name is, the voice continued, a perfect copy of my own. My heart leapt, my chest tightening. I turned in circles, trying to find the source, the speakers, anything. The voice echoed off the walls, bouncing down the hall, up the stairwells, through the broken windows, surrounding me. I don't remember how it started. My voice. My own words, describing things I had only felt, thoughts I hadn't spoken aloud. I tried to speak, to call out, but my mouth felt dry, unresponsive. The PA system didn't pause. It was reading my mind, my memories, broadcasting them into the empty asylum. I feel the cold first, creeping into my chest. The building, it watches. It waits. I stumbled backward, gripping my flashlight as if it could protect me. Each step I took seemed to echo in perfect rhythm with the words, like the building itself was narrating my terror. The voice didn't stop. It was describing my thoughts, my heartbeat, my fear in real time. My legs are heavy, my hands cold. I can't move fast enough. I know what's coming, and I can't. The static crackled, growing louder, sharper, as if impatient. The words came faster now, urgent, almost frantic. Every syllable was mine, yet twisted, almost as if they had been rewritten by the walls themselves. I'm trapped. I can't leave. It knows me. The shadows know me. They're here. I ran. My boots splashed through puddles, my flashlight beam shaking with each panicked movement. The voice followed me, drifting through the corridors, narrating my flight as if it had always been planned. I reached the stairwell, the one that groans under my weight. The shadows twist, curling around me, pulling, waiting. My heart pounds. I reached the stairwell, clutching the railing, the metal slick and cold beneath my fingers. My breaths came in ragged gasps. The PA system crackled above, yet I could hear it clearly. My own voice, speaking words I hadn't even formed yet. I see the ceiling leak, the water dripping, the plaster crumbling. Every sound is amplified. I am small, fragile. The words froze in the air for a second, static humming in the silence, and I realized it wasn't just narrating. It was predicting. Every movement I made, every thought I had, it knew. It had known. The asylum wasn't just recording me. It had been waiting for me to arrive, waiting to complete this broadcast. I stumbled into the main hall, flashlight beam flickering over the peeling paint and broken tiles. The voice continued, uninterrupted, seamless. I am falling. I am going to fall. The floor is wet. The boards are broken. My hands slip. I know I am going to fall. I didn't want to. I wanted to stop. I wanted to scream. but my voice was swallowed by the PA system, amplified and distorted. It didn't echo my fear. It consumed it, twisted it, made it part of the building's memory. I tried to reach the control room, the old PA switchboard, wires hanging from the ceiling, some sparking, some silent. Maybe I could stop it there, cut the power, silence the voice. But the hallway shifted as I ran. The building was no longer a building. It was a living thing, moving, reshaping itself, guiding me or maybe trapping me. The walls close in. The shadows stretch. I can't see the corners, but I know they are watching. I am alone yet not. I feel them behind me. I turned a corner and nearly dropped my flashlight. The words were coming from every direction now, echoing off the walls in impossible ways. My own voice describing the terror in my chest, describing the movements of my body, describing the panic twisting through my mind. I can hear it now, the sound of my own panic. It is louder than the rain, louder than my heartbeat. I am small, weak. I stumbled, falling to my knees. My flashlight rolled away, the beam cutting wild, frantic patterns across the walls. My chest heaved, lungs burning, and the voice didn't stop. It was growing clearer, sharper, closer. Every word, every syllable, perfectly timed, perfectly mine. I am dying. I know it. The building takes me. The shadows embrace me. I am falling, and there is no escape. I clawed at the floor, trying to scramble, trying to find anything solid to hold on to, but the tiles beneath my hands shifted, slick with water. My fingers slipped, and my chest hit the ground with a thud. The voice continued, narrating every detail, every thought I hadn't even formed yet. My hands are wet. The blood or water, I can't tell. My chest tightens. I am panicked. The walls remember me. I am part of them. I could feel the building around me, pressing down, reshaping the corridors, pulling me closer to something I couldn't see. The PA system had no source I could reach. The voice was everywhere. I was everywhere. I was trapped in my own narrative, a story being told in real time, broadcast through decades of walls, wires, and waiting. The shadows twist closer. The darkness curls around me like smoke. My breath catches. I cannot escape. I am alone. I pressed my face to the floor, trying to block it out, trying to ignore the words. But it was impossible. My own voice described my thoughts, my fears, my panic, faster than I could think them. Faster than I could breathe! I see the end. I feel it. I cannot stop it. The building has been waiting. The voices, the echoes, they guide me. I am small. I am alone. I screamed. Or maybe the voice screamed through me. I couldn't tell anymore. The PA system amplified it, distorted it, turned it into something larger, something beyond me. My hands clawed at the walls, at the floor, at anything solid. My nails scraped against plaster, tile, and rusted metal. I fall. I am taken. The building remembers me. I am part of it. I am gone. The words faded, leaving only static. My chest heaved, my body shaking, sweat and water mixing on my skin. I stayed there for a long time, listening to the silence, trying to convince myself it was over, but it wasn't. I knew it wasn't. The voice had told me everything, and in doing so had claimed me. I dragged myself to my feet, legs trembling, back pressed against a wall. The building seemed quieter now, but the air remained heavy, still, patient. I knew the PA system could start again at any time. My own voice could rise from the walls, narrating me, predicting me, until the building was done. I didn't leave that night. I couldn't. I stayed sitting in the main hall, flashlight broken, knees pulled to my chest. I thought about what I had heard, about the way it described my death, about the inevitability of it. The asylum wasn't just a building. It was a recorder, a storyteller, and I was the story. Hours passed, though I couldn't tell how long. The rain outside slowed, then stopped. The shadows moved differently now, longer, curling in ways that shouldn't have been possible. And somewhere deep inside, I knew the broadcast hadn't ended. It was only paused, waiting for the next time, the next round, the next visitor, waiting for me. I realized, sitting there in the dark, that I had become part of the building's memory. Every drop of water, every echo, every shadow carried a fragment of me now. The PA system wasn't broken. It wasn't haunted. It was alive, and it knew me better than I knew myself. I didn't try to sleep. I didn't move. I sat in that hall, listening, waiting, knowing the next broadcast could start at any second. My own voice describing my death before it happened. Perfectly timed, perfectly inevitable. The asylum was patient, and so was I in a way, because I had no choice. I had been claimed. My story had joined the countless others etched into these walls, and every night, every sound, every shadow would remind me of it, whispering, narrating, waiting, and I would listen. I've been a 911 dispatcher for 5 years. Most nights are routine: car accidents, domestic squabbles, the occasional panicked old man who can't find his cat. But that night, October 17th, sometime after midnight, was different. That night, nothing made sense. It started with the first call. The line was quiet at first, just the hum of the connection. Then a voice, shaky, ragged, almost whispering. "Please, help me." "They're here." I asked the usual questions: location, nature of the emergency, number of people involved. The voice trembled. "Cemetery. On Highway 37. I hesitated, typing the address into the system. Highway 37 is long, winding, lined with trees that block the moonlight. "There's a cemetery there, abandoned for decades, cracked stones, overgrown grass, no caretakers, no one around. Just the wind and the way shadows bend around the graves." "Sir," I said slowly, trying to keep my tone calm, professional. "Are you sure about the address?" "Yes," he whispered, and then nothing. Just static, a faint scratching, like nails on concrete. The line went dead. I shrugged, assuming a prank, and sent a unit anyway. Standard procedure. If someone's calling 911 even from a spooky old cemetery in the middle of nowhere, we respond. But as I logged the call, my stomach twisted. Something in that voice, too real to ignore. An hour later, another call. Same pattern, same voice, though quieter, weaker, almost distant, as if they were moving through the fog. "Please help me." "Highway 37, I checked the system." Same address. Abandoned cemetery. No units reported any activity yet. I sent another crew, more insistent this time, feeling a cold knot settle in my chest. By the third call, I felt my hands shaking on the keyboard. Same address, same cemetery, same vague panic in the voice. But this one left a sound behind. A soft, wet breathing. Slow, methodical. Like someone standing inches from the receiver, just behind me. I tried calling back. Just ringing. Nobody picked up. Dispatch started to feel like a loop. Calls kept coming, each more urgent than the last. "Please, hurry. They're coming. Don't let them." The line would cut before I could get a full sentence. And every time the map kept pointing to the same cemetery. I double-checked, triple-checked. No new streets, no hidden side roads. Just that lonely stretch of Highway 37, lined with shadows that I imagined moving if I stared too long. At some point, I realized the calls weren't just random. They were layered. I could hear faint murmurs underneath the voice, like echoes of other people, trapped beneath the static. Each call sounded like it was overlapping the previous ones, a tangled mess of panic and desperation. I started writing them down, chronologically, but it didn't help. It only made the loop worse. By the fifth call, I was alone in the dispatch room. Night shift. Everyone else gone. Only me, the hum of fluorescent lights, and the incessant ring of the phone. I answered. The voice was calm this time. Too calm. "Why won't you come?" I froze, the tone. It wasn't human. There was something in it. Something ancient and knowing. Like it was inside my head as much as on the other end of the line. I swallowed, trying to stay professional. "Units are on the way. Stay calm." "Can you tell me what's happening?" The line went dead. I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my temples. This wasn't standard. This wasn't even a prank. Whoever or whatever was calling had knowledge. Knowledge of me. Knowledge of my procedures. My floor plan. The exact route I would take if I drove there myself. Then, just as I was trying to collect my thoughts, the phone rang again. And again, it was the same call. Same cemetery. Same Highway 37. But this time, there was something else. Something I couldn't explain. The background noise. A low, dragging sound like boots across dry leaves over broken stones. And laughter. Soft, distant, but unmistakable. Children? Maybe. Or something pretending. I sent another unit. pressing the emergency override button, trying to get someone on the scene faster. But each time the officers called back, they reported nothing. Empty. Grave markers. Rustling leaves. No footprints, no people. Just the wind. And every time the call came again, the voice sounded closer. I could feel it in the room with me, breathing over my shoulder, whispering my name, mocking me. By the 8th call, I wasn't taking notes anymore. I was scribbling, trying to trace the pattern, trying to make sense of the loop. Each call began exactly where the last had ended, as if the universe itself had broken, recycling the same desperation over and over. I called my supervisor. "It's the cemetery," I said, voice cracking. "Highway 37, multiple calls, all empty. Something's wrong." "Send the units," she replied calmly. "You're probably overthinking it. Ghost pranksters, kids in the woods. Don't let it get to you." Her calm voice only made it worse. It reminded me how alone I was, the futility of my role, trying to save people who might not exist. I tried tracing the caller ID, but it kept showing the same number. The number belonged to the precinct itself, ours. Not random, not external. Somehow internal, like the calls were being made from inside my own station. The ringing wouldn't stop. Each new call started before the previous line even went dead. Sometimes overlapping, sometimes layered. I could hear whispers from 2 or 3 calls at once. They spoke over each other, urgent, pleading, crying, and then the strangest thing happened. For a split second, I thought I heard my own voice, whispering through the receiver, asking me to run. But I wasn't saying it. I was alone. I slammed the phone down, tried to block the sound. Tried to convince myself it was fatigue, hallucinations, stress, but the room was colder now, colder than it should be for a dispatch center. My breath fogged in front of me. And the static, it wasn't just in the phone anymore. It filled the room, a low hum that vibrated against my skull. I called the next unit again, my hands shaking so badly I could barely dial. "Please," I said into the headset. "Check the cemetery. Check everything. Someone has to see." The line went dead, and then I saw it. The shadow, moving across the monitor. Not a glitch. Not a reflection. A dark shape. Human-shaped, standing among the graves in the camera feed from the remote security post near Highway 37. It didn't move naturally. It slid, gliding across the screen like liquid, and every time I blinked it seemed closer. I froze. The call started again, faster this time, screaming at me, begging me to come, to leave, to stop, to run. I couldn't stop listening. I couldn't stop hearing them. The sound was inside my skull, reverberating in rhythm with my heartbeat. I remember whispering to the empty room, "It's not real, it's not real." But deep down I knew it was, and then I realized something worse. The calls weren't random. They weren't repeating for no reason. They were teaching me the pattern, preparing me. Every ring, every static-filled whisper, every dragging step through dead leaves was a breadcrumb, leading me somewhere I wasn't ready to go. I wanted to leave. I wanted to turn off the phone, lock the doors, drive away, never come back. But part of me couldn't. Part of me needed to see it. Needed to understand why this loop existed, why the cemetery kept calling, why the dead, or whoever, or whatever, were waiting for me there. By the 11th call, my head ached, pounding in time with the endless ringing. The voice on the line whispered my name so clearly it made the hairs on my arms stand on end. "Do you see me yet?" it said, and I did. I saw it in the screen. Not through the camera, not really. Through the shadows behind it. Shapes moving, darker than darkness, crawling, crouching, reaching. The man, or whatever it was, stood in the center still. Watching, waiting, smiling. I can't explain how I knew. But I knew I was next. And then, just like that, the phone stopped. Silence. Pure, suffocating silence. No static, no whisper, no dragging footsteps, nothing. I sat there, staring at the monitor, heart hammering, hands shaking, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it. But deep down, I knew the loop hadn't ended. Not really. It was waiting. For me. I didn't leave the dispatch center that night. I couldn't. Even if I wanted to, my legs felt like lead, and my mind was tangled in the voices from Highway 37. The calls hadn't stopped. They were quieter now, just murmurs in the background, like a warning echoing in a cavern I couldn't see. But the moment I tried to stand, I felt eyes on me, watching, patient, unblinking, impossible to ignore. It started with a knock on the side door. Light, deliberate, almost polite. I froze, holding my breath. Who could possibly be here at this hour? The precinct was empty except for me. I approached slowly. And when I cracked the door, I saw two figures in uniform standing in the hallway. They looked like police officers. Standard dark jackets, badges glinting under the dim fluorescent light, radios clipped to their shoulders. But there was something off, something subtle but wrong. Their faces, blurred in memory though painfully familiar, made my stomach tighten. "Evening," one said, voice calm, clipped, professional. "We heard there was activity at Highway 37. Thought we'd check in." I blinked, uncertain. I'm the dispatcher tonight." "Highway 37? The cemetery?" My voice shook despite my effort to stay steady. "Exactly," the second officer said. Their tone was gentle, but there was a weight behind it, an insistence that made me uneasy. "We've been monitoring. Can't have you dealing with it alone. I wanted to ask where they came from. Where were the other officers?" Everyone else was off duty. I wanted to reach for the phone to confirm their identities, but somehow I couldn't. Something inside me told me not to move too fast. "You're familiar with this place, then?" I asked cautiously. "Highway 37. The cemetery." They exchanged a look, a blink that lasted too long. "We know," one said. "We've been there. Many times." Something inside me snapped. My heart hammered against my ribs. "You've been there when?" The first officer smiled faintly, and it was unsettling, like they were sharing a secret I wasn't supposed to know. "Long ago. Before you even thought to call it in. Before it got messy." "Messy?" I whispered, taking a step back. My mind raced. There had been stories, old reports buried in the archives, disappearances, officers who'd vanished without trace. Decades-old cases I'd read about during my orientation. Names that were almost myth now. And somehow, these two men, or maybe ghosts, or something else, were standing here, claiming to be part of those same stories. "Yes," the second officer said. "We were assigned there. Highway 37, the cemetery." "The loop," my stomach dropped. You were gone." "All of you. Everyone who ever called it in. Missing. Years ago." They nodded as if confirming what I had known, but feared too much to say aloud. "It's still happening," one said quietly. "And it never really leaves. Not for anyone who touches it." I wanted to scream, to tell them they weren't real, to wake up from whatever nightmare this had become. But my voice caught in my throat. The dispatch room felt smaller now, walls pressing closer, fluorescent lights flickering like they were breathing. "Why are you here?" I managed, finally. "Why now?" "To make sure it doesn't claim you," the first officer said. His eyes were too sharp, too knowing. "It waits, always, but we can guide you, if you'll listen." I wanted to laugh, but it came out as a choked, dry rasp. "Guide me?" "You disappeared. You're not real. You're part of the stories. I read the reports." The second officer stepped closer, and with him came the smell of wet leaves, decaying wood, something earthy and ancient. "We are real enough to save you," he said, "but you have to trust us. Highway 37 doesn't let anyone leave unchanged." "We learned that the hard way," I shivered. "What? What do you mean? What happened to you?" They exchanged a look again, silent communication I couldn't decipher. Then the first officer spoke, voice low. "We got trapped. Pulled into the loop like everyone else who came before. But we found a way to survive inside it, to watch, to wait, to help. You survived," I whispered. My mind spun. How could someone survive something that wasn't supposed to be survived? "Highway 37 didn't leave traces, didn't let people leave." "Yes," the second officer said. "But surviving isn't the same as leaving." "Not really. We exist in the space between, waiting for those who will follow." A cold gust of air swept through the room, though the doors were closed. My hair lifted, goosebumps crawling up my arms. The shadows in the corners seemed to stretch, reaching toward me like fingers of darkness. "Why me?" I asked, voice trembling. "I'm just a dispatcher. I don't do field work." They were silent a long moment. Then the first officer said, Because you answered the calls. You listened. You didn't hang up. That matters. That's what it feeds on. Fear, yes, but also attention. The ones who survive are the ones who don't look away. I felt nausea, the room tilting slightly as my mind tried to process what they were saying. So, I'm next? Not if you listen, the second officer said softly. Not if you understand. Highway 37 is a loop, a trap, a memory that doesn't belong to anyone anymore. But it reacts to thought, to attention, to disbelief, and you've already acknowledged it. I pressed my palms to my eyes, trying to block it all out. But when I opened them again, they were closer, their faces clearer, lines etched into their skin, eyes hollowed from years in limbo, shadows clinging to them like dark coats. You'll see them, the first officer said. The others, the ones who never left. They're not gone, not really. You'll recognize them soon enough. And when you do, don't panic. They only want what you want. Release. My chest tightened. Release? Yes, the second officer said. From the loop, from being forgotten, from the waiting. But it doesn't come easy. Highway 37, it knows fear. It thrives on it. It'll test you, push you, show you things you wish you hadn't seen. It'll bend reality until you're not sure what's real. What's memory? What's alive? I swallowed hard. My mind flicked to the calls. The static. The whispers overlapping in layers of terror I couldn't untangle. And then the cemetery, the dragging steps, the laughter, all of it waiting. Always waiting. How do I survive it? I asked, voice small, almost pleading. Listen, the first officer said. Notice patterns. Follow them. Don't let fear guide you, only observation. Highway 37 is patience incarnate. It won't rush you. It waits. But if you hesitate too long, it'll consume you. That's how it got us. The second officer stepped forward, closer still. And when you see the others, the officers, the lost, the ones who vanished before you, they will not speak. They cannot. They are reminders, shadows, mirrors. Look, but don't touch. Don't engage unless you want to disappear as well. I nodded, though I didn't feel any surer. My hands shook, my legs were jelly beneath me. I wanted to ask questions, to argue, to demand proof. But something about the room pressed down. Silence stretching like a living thing, filling every crack, every corner. They stepped back then, and the fluorescent lights flickered again. We'll be here, the first officer said. Until you go. Until you make it to the end. Or until Highway 37 decides you stay. The second officer added, remember, you are never alone. But you must stay aware. The loop can be subtle, patient, deadly in small increments. Don't look away, even for a second. And do not ignore the calls. They are part of it, part of the cycle. But they are also your guide if you pay attention. I watched them fade toward the hallway exit, their footsteps silent despite the proximity. When the door clicked shut, I realized I was alone again. The room felt smaller, darker. The hum of the fluorescent lights, the quiet ticking of a distant clock, even the faint static in the phones, it all felt like part of the loop itself. I sank into my chair, resting my head against the cold plastic. My hands were trembling, eyes stinging with unshed tears. I wanted to believe they were gone. I wanted to believe the room was empty. But I knew, deep down, that wasn't true. Highway 37 was patient, waiting, watching. And somewhere out there, the other officers were still trapped, still vanished, still waiting for someone else to follow the calls, to answer, to notice. And now, somehow, it had me. I woke to the sound of rain, not the gentle patter of a storm, but heavy, relentless sheets beating against asphalt, turning the world outside the precinct windows into a blur of gray and black. I blinked, disoriented, my body aching from a sleep I couldn't remember falling into. The room smelled of damp concrete, of paper and static, and something else, something metallic. The phones were quiet. Too quiet. My fingers hovered above the keyboard, my stomach tightening. Then a soft buzz from the line. A call. Same as always. Highway 37, the abandoned cemetery. My pulse jumped, but my voice, when I finally spoke, was hoarse. Hello? No answer. Only the sound of rain, and beneath it, a dragging sound. Soft, slow. As if someone, or something, was moving through wet leaves. inches from the microphone. My hand trembled as I grabbed the radio mic, intending to reach the officers out on patrol. But when I keyed it, there was only static, humming, and a faint whisper of my own name. I realized then, with sudden, suffocating clarity, that I wasn't alone. Not in the dispatch center. Not anywhere. Highway 37 wasn't outside. It was inside, in the hum of fluorescent lights, in the shadows stretching along the walls, in the empty spaces behind my eyelids. I had crossed the threshold, and it had claimed me. I tried to stand, tried to move, but my legs wouldn't respond the way they should. It felt like I was already moving, but not under my own power. The room spun, rain blurring the windows, and for a second, the fluorescent lights flickered, revealing figures standing behind the chairs. Not real, and yet familiar. The officers from before, the ones who vanished decades ago. They were watching, patient, their faces pale and hollow, eyes voids that reflected nothing, yet held everything. "You've joined us," the first officer said, voice low, echoing off the walls. "The loop has claimed you. You'll understand soon enough." I swallowed, trying to speak, but no sound came out. I felt a chill crawl down my spine. Highway 37 wasn't just a place anymore. It was a cycle, a trap, and I was inside it. Whether I wanted to be or not. The rain outside intensified, hammering against the glass, and I realized I wasn't hearing it alone. It was in my head now, every drop, every splash, a reminder that the night was eternal, that the loop had no beginning and no end. I thought back to the calls, all of them. Every frantic voice, every whisper, every static-laden plea for help. They weren't just recordings of terror. They were fragments of reality bending, layers of past and present, feeding into one another, repeating until the line between living and lost blurred. And I was part of it. I had answered, I had listened, and now the loop considered me one of its keepers. I tried to run, tried to leave the precinct, but the doors weren't doors anymore. They opened onto rain-soaked roads that stretched endlessly, curling into darkness. Highway 37. Every step I took led me deeper into the same wet asphalt nightmare. The cemetery loomed in the distance, shadows twisting over tombstones I knew I had no right to see. The officers were beside me now, silent, moving without sound. They didn't speak, didn't guide. They just existed, and that was enough to make my skin crawl. Their presence was a reminder. The loop wasn't just a location. It was a condition, a sentence, and I was now serving it. I kept driving or walking, I couldn't tell which. The rain blurred everything, turning trees into black smudges, signs into warped rectangles, the moon into a sickly smear of light behind endless clouds. Every time I glanced at the rearview mirror or the reflection in the puddles, it showed not my face, but theirs. Hollow eyes staring from the corners, from the edges, from every angle my mind tried to focus on. Time had no meaning. Minutes stretched into hours. Hours into an eternity of headlights slicing through fog, wipers streaking the rain, tires hissing over slick asphalt. And always, always the call. Whispering, urging, reminding. Highway 37, the cemetery. The loop. My name. My mistakes. My attention. I remembered my life before this. Dispatching calls. Eating lunch alone at the precinct. The hum of computers. The coffee cups. The mundane human fears that seem so trivial now. And I realized I missed it. Missed the ability to sleep without feeling the weight of unseen eyes. To exist without being observed. To end a shift and go home. All of it gone. Erased. Replaced with rain, asphalt, shadows, and the faint echo of voices that were mine and not mine. And then I saw them. Not in mirrors, not in reflections, but on the road ahead. Figures stepping out of the mist. Officers, past victims of the loop. Some familiar, some unknown. Faces pale and drawn, eyes hollow. They moved with deliberate slowness, watching, waiting. Some lifted hands in acknowledgement, others merely stared, weightless and patient. I wanted to stop, to swerve, to hide. But the vehicle, or my legs, moved with a will I didn't control. Highway 37 was no longer a path. It was a river, and I was the current. And I understood. I wasn't trying to escape it. I was meant to patrol it, forever. The rain never stopped. The loop never ended. Each bend of the road revealed more figures, more shadows, more ghosts of calls unanswered, cries forgotten, and officers who disappeared. They were my reflection now, the warning I had ignored, the reminder that Highway 37 didn't forgive. I tried to speak to them, tried to warn them, to tell them I understood. But my voice was swallowed by the rain, by the wind, by the hum of the loop. And I realized something worse. Speaking didn't matter. Action didn't matter. Recognition didn't matter. Only attention did. Only listening. Only observing. And I was doing that now, with a focus I had never known, cataloging every detail, every whisper, every shadow, every tree twisted too sharply, every sign warped in the fog. Every puddle reflected shapes that didn't exist. Highway 37 fed on observation, and I was learning the rules, slowly, terrifyingly, relentlessly. The officers, my fellow looped watchers, stopped at intervals, letting me pass, letting me witness. They didn't guide. They didn't prevent me from making mistakes. But their presence was a constant pressure, a reminder that the night was eternal, that the loop was patient, that mistakes had consequences beyond comprehension. I began to understand the rhythm, drive, observe, note the whispers, recognize the figures, avoid the edges, never ignore a call, always answer, always witness, and through it, perhaps survive another cycle. Perhaps. But even as I moved, even as I memorized the patterns, I felt the weight of eternity pressing down. The rain soaked through every layer of clothing, every barrier, as if trying to merge me with the asphalt, the mud, the shadows. My reflection appeared in puddles, twisted, hollow-eyed, staring back with realization. I was no longer me. I was an observer, a part of the loop, condemned, patrolling, watching, waiting, forever. I glimpsed a cemetery in the distance. Tombstones cracked and moss-covered, trees clawing at the sky. The figures were closer now, standing between the wet road and the gravestones. Some faces were familiar, the vanished officers, the ones who came before, but their eyes were empty. They didn't move, didn't speak, just existed, waiting for me to join fully, waiting for the loop to claim another fragment of reality. And I did. In that moment, I stopped fighting. I stopped hoping. Highway 37 had claimed me. Not violently, not with screams, but slowly, with inevitability. My hands gripped the wheel, or my own legs, or whatever part of myself remained, and I moved forward. Always forward. Rain-slick asphalt stretching ahead like an endless tongue of black. The night never ended. The calls never stopped. And now, somewhere in the shadows, I whispered the same things I once heard. Highway 37, the cemetery. The loop, my name, observing, waiting, patrolling, forever. I am part of it now. I always will be. And I know as I turn another corner that the others are watching. The lost ones who never left, the officers who vanished before me. I am both witness and prisoner, caught in the same pattern I once reported. And in the reflection of the puddles, in the distorted shapes of fog and rain, I see them all. And I know I am like them. Condemned. The night has no end. The loop has no mercy. Highway 37 is eternal, and I am its keeper.